Picture the dawn breaking over northern China, where mist clings to mountain ridges like the breath of sleeping dragons. From this height, suspended between earth and sky, a serpentine line of ancient stone emerges from the morning haze, the Great Wall of China, stretching beyond the horizon in both directions, disappearing into landscapes that seem to exist outside of time itself. For over 2 millennia, this colossal structure has wound its way through the collective imagination of humanity, a testament to imperial ambition and human determination. Yet as the first rays of sunlight illuminate its weathered battlements, casting shadows that have fallen across these stones for countless generations, a profound question whispers through the mountain air. What if everything we believe about this wall's origins is merely the echo of a much older truth? The official chronicles speak of emperors and dynasties, of armies of workers laboring under the harsh commands of the Qin. They tell us of a wall born from political necessity in the 7th century BCE, unified and expanded by the first emperor of China around 220 BCE. But what if these stones remember a different story? What if, beneath the layers of imperial history and dynastic propaganda, lies evidence of builders whose names have been erased by time itself? Standing here, where the wall seems to merge with the very bones of the earth, one cannot escape the sensation that this structure possesses a memory far deeper than human records suggest. The massive blocks of granite and limestone, some weighing several tons, appear to have grown from the mountain itself, as if placed by hands that understood not just the art of construction, but the secret language of stone and sky. Recent archaeological discoveries have begun to whisper of anomalies carbon, dating results that don't align with accepted timelines, geological evidence suggesting some sections may have weathered far longer than historical records indicate, and construction techniques that seem to echo building methods from cultures that supposedly never existed in this region. These fragments of evidence, scattered like puzzle pieces across academic journals and research papers, hint at a possibility that challenges our fundamental understanding of Chinese civilization itself. The wall appears to breathe in the morning light, its ancient stones expanding and contracting with the changing temperature, as if alive with secrets that span not merely centuries, but millennia. Local villagers who have lived in its shadow for generations speak in hushed tones of legends, passed down through oral tradition, stories of walls built by beings who walked the earth before the first dynasty ever raised its banner, tales of structures that predate not just the emperors, but perhaps even the written word itself. As the mist continues to lift, revealing more of the wall's impossible length, the question becomes not whether this monument holds secrets, but how many layers of forgotten history lie buried beneath its acknowledged past. Could it be that what we call the Great Wall of China is actually the latest iteration of a defensive system that stretches back through ages now lost to human memory? The stones themselves seem to invite such speculation, their surfaces bearing the patina of ages, marked by weather patterns that suggest exposure to climatic conditions, radically different from those recorded in historical accounts. Here and there, embedded within the masonry, are materials that raise eyebrows among geologists. Limestone that appears to have originated from quarries hundreds of miles away. Mortar compositions that puzzle modern chemists, and construction techniques that seem to reflect knowledge traditions spanning continents. As morning transforms into day, and tour groups begin their ascent along restored sections of the wall, few pause to consider that they may be walking atop one of humanity's greatest mysteries. For if the Great Wall is indeed older than we think, if its foundations were laid by builders whose civilizations have vanished so completely that only stone remains to mark their passage, then we must reconsider not just the timeline of Chinese history, but our understanding of human civilization itself. The wall stretches onward, seemingly without end, carrying its secrets into landscapes where history and legend blur into something larger than either alone could contain. As archaeologists and historians have long maintained, the narrative of the Great Wall begins not with mystery, but with the practical concerns of warring states and ambitious rulers. The accepted timeline emerges from centuries of scholarly research, supported by imperial records, archaeological evidence, and the careful analysis of construction techniques that can be traced through China's documented dynasties. The earliest fortifications that would eventually evolve into the Great Wall were constructed during the Spring and Autumn period, beginning around the 7th century BCE. These initial walls were not the unified structure we recognize today, but rather a collection of defensive barriers built by various competing kingdoms, the states of Siochu, Qian, and Zhao among them. Each sought to protect their territories from neighboring rivals and the persistent threat of nomadic tribes pressing southward from the steppes. These early walls were primarily constructed using rammed earth techniques, where successive layers of soil, clay, and organic materials were compressed between wooden frames to create formidable barriers. Archaeological excavations have revealed remnants of these ancient fortifications, their earthen cores still bearing the impressions of the wooden planks used in their construction. The sophistication of these early defensive systems suggests a level of engineering, knowledge, and organizational capability that speaks to the advanced nature of these ancient Chinese civilizations. The transformation from scattered defensive walls to a unified Great Wall occurred under the reign of Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of unified China, around 220 BCE. Historical records describe how the emperor ordered the connection and extension of existing walls, creating a continuous defensive barrier stretching from the western deserts to the eastern seas. This monumental undertaking reportedly required the labor of over 1 million worker soldiers, peasants, and prisoners, many of whom never lived to see the project's completion. The construction techniques employed during the Qin dynasty represent a remarkable feat of ancient engineering. Workers developed methods for transporting massive stone blocks across mountainous terrain, created lime-based mortar that have endured for over 2 millennia, and established supply lines that could support construction crews across hundreds of miles of challenging landscape. The wall built during this period utilized locally available materials: stone in mountainous regions, earth and wood in plains areas, and even reeds and sand in desert sections. Following the fall of the Qin dynasty, subsequent rulers continued to maintain and expand the wall system. The Han dynasty extended it westward along the Silk Road, while later dynasties focused on reinforcing key sections and adapting the structure to meet evolving military threats. The Ming dynasty, ruling from 1368 to 1644 CE, was responsible for much of the Great Wall that tourists visit today. Ming engineers replaced many earthen sections with brick and stone, creating the more permanent and visually impressive structure that has become an enduring symbol of Chinese civilization. Archaeological evidence strongly supports this historical timeline. Excavations have uncovered artifacts, coins, and pottery fragments that can be precisely dated to specific dynastic periods. Analysis of mortar samples reveals chemical compositions consistent with materials and techniques known to have been available during documented construction phases. Carbon dating of organic materials found within wall structures aligns closely with historical records of major building campaigns. The wall's construction also reflects the evolving military needs of Chinese civilization. Early sections were designed primarily to defend against cavalry attacks, with heights and angles calculated to neutralize the advantages of mounted warriors. Later modifications incorporated features for housing garrisons, storing supplies, and facilitating communication across vast distances through beacon towers and signal fires. Imperial records provide detailed accounts of the massive resources devoted to wall construction and maintenance. Documents describe the establishment of entire administrative systems dedicated to managing the project, including specialized units for quarrying stone, transporting materials, and coordinating the efforts of construction crews. These bureaucratic systems themselves represent remarkable organizational achievements, requiring sophisticated logistics and communication networks to function effectively. This official narrative supported by extensive historical documentation and archaeological evidence, presents the Great Wall as a monumental achievement of human organization and engineering skill, built over centuries through the combined efforts of multiple dynasties and countless individual workers. It stands as testament to the ambition of Chinese emperors and the determination of the Chinese people to protect their civilization from external threats. Yet even within this well-documented history, certain elements continue to puzzle researchers and invite deeper investigation. Beneath the weight of accepted history, where official narratives rest upon foundations of imperial chronicles and dynastic records, the Earth itself whispers a different story. In recent decades, as advanced archaeological techniques have peeled back layers of time with unprecedented precision, anomalies have begun to surface subtle discrepancies that suggest the Great Wall's origins may extend deeper into antiquity than conventional wisdom acknowledges. The first whispers of something unusual emerged from routine geological surveys conducted along sections of the wall in the 1990s. Soil samples taken from beneath foundation stones revealed stratification patterns that didn't align perfectly with expected timelines. Carbon dating of organic materials embedded in the lowest layers of certain wall sections produced dates that seemed to push construction back several centuries beyond documented records. While these early findings were often dismissed as contamination or measurement error, the pattern persisted across multiple sites and testing facilities. Dr. Li Wei, a geologist from Beijing University, spent 3 years analyzing core samples taken from beneath the wall near Battling. His findings, published in a modest archaeological journal in 2003, suggested that some foundation materials showed signs of having been in place for potentially hundreds of years before the documented Qing construction began. The soil chemistry indicated prolonged weathering patterns that seemed inconsistent with the accepted timeline of rapid construction under imperial mandate. More intriguing discoveries emerged from restoration projects undertaken in the early 2000s. When workers began reinforcing deteriorating sections near Jinshanling, they uncovered stone blocks whose surfaces bore weathering patterns that puzzled construction experts. The degree of mineral leaching and surface erosion appeared to require exposure, periods far exceeding the known age of these wall sections. Chemical analysis revealed that certain stones contained marine fossils and sedimentary deposits characteristic of geological formations found hundreds of miles from their current location. The mortar binding these ancient stones presented its own mysteries. While Ming Dynasty mortar typically consisted of lime, glutinous rice, and egg whites, a formula well documented in historical records, some of the deeper, older mortar exhibited chemical compositions that defied easy categorization. Spectroscopic analysis revealed mineral components that suggested different source materials and potentially different preparation techniques than those recorded in imperial construction manuals. Archaeological teams working near Shanhaiguan discovered what appeared to be earlier wall foundations running parallel to, but slightly offset from, the known Ming construction. These deeper foundations, constructed using rammed earth techniques, showed signs of having supported substantial structures for extended periods before being incorporated into later building projects. Pottery fragments and bronze artifacts found within these earlier foundations dated to periods preceding documented wall construction by several centuries. Perhaps most puzzling were the construction techniques themselves. While the engineering methods employed in documented wall building were sophisticated, certain sections displayed approaches that seemed to reflect different technological traditions. Some stone cutting patterns appeared to employ techniques more commonly associated with cultures from Central Asia or even the Mediterranean, suggesting either extensive trade relationships or the involvement of builders with diverse cultural backgrounds. The discovery of what archaeologists termed ghost walls married stone alignments that seemed to follow the same general path as the visible Great Wall, but at different elevations raised questions about the site as construction history. Ground-penetrating radar surveys revealed these subsurface structures in multiple locations, some running for miles beneath the recognized wall. The existence of these buried alignments suggested either multiple construction phases spanning longer periods than recorded, or the incorporation of existing structures into later building projects. Mineralogical analysis of wall stones revealed another puzzle. While local quarries could account for most construction materials, certain stones exhibited characteristics suggesting origins from geological formations that would have required extensive transportation networks to access. The logistics of moving such materials across China's challenging terrain would have represented massive undertakings, requiring sophisticated organizational capabilities and resources. The accumulated weight of these anomalies began to suggest a picture of construction that was more complex and potentially more ancient than historical records indicated. Rather than representing a single, unified building project, the evidence hinted at a structure that might have evolved over much longer periods, incorporating earlier defensive works and building upon foundations laid by previous generations of builders. As research techniques continued to advance, each new method of analysis seemed to reveal additional layers of complexity in the wall's construction history, suggesting that beneath the stones of China's most famous monument lay secrets that conventional archaeology was only beginning to uncover. In the villages that nestle against the Great Wall's shadow, where morning mist mingles with the smoke of countless hearth fires, old women still whisper stories their grandmothers told them, tales of walls built not by emperors, but by beings whose footsteps shook the earth itself. These myths, dismissed by scholars as folklore and superstition, may actually preserve memories of a time when the very concept of the wall emerged from realms far beyond human ambition. The legend of the Dragon King's Wall appears in variations throughout northern China, passed down through oral tradition in communities that have existed in the wall's proximity for countless generations. According to these stories, long before the first dynasty raised its banners, a great dragon emerged from beneath the Yellow River, its serpentine body carving valleys and raising mountains as it moved across the land. Where the dragon's body came to rest, the earth rose into a great barrier of stone and earth, forming the original wall that would guide all future construction. Local shamans in remote mountain villages speak of the Wall of the Sky Giants, describing builders of immense stature who could lift massive stones with their bare hands and see across vast distances with eyes like burning coals. These giants, according to legend, worked not for human masters, but in service to cosmic forces that required barriers between different realms of existence. The wall they built was said to separate not just territories, but different planes of reality itself. Perhaps most intriguing are the myths surrounding the builders before Mena, race of beings who possessed knowledge of stone and sky that surpassed human understanding. These legends describe structures built using techniques that allowed stones to fuse together without mortar, creating walls that grew like living things, adapting to changes in weather and landscape. The story suggests these early builders possessed abilities that we might now interpret as advanced engineering knowledge, but which ancient peoples understood as magic. The Mongol chronicles, recorded centuries later by traveling merchants and diplomats, contain references to walls that existed long before Chinese civilization established its dominance in the region. These accounts describe structures built by the first people of the steppes, nomadic cultures whose mastery of construction techniques allowed them to create permanent fortifications that could withstand both military assault and the harsh extremes of steppe weather. According to these sources, when Chinese armies first encountered these ancient walls, they were already so old that their original builders had passed into legend. Tibetan manuscripts preserved in remote monasteries contain references to barriers built by the earth shapers, beings who could command stone and soil to form protective boundaries around sacred territories. These texts describe walls that served not military purposes, but spiritual ones, creating boundaries between the material world and the realm of spirits and ancestors. The construction techniques described in these manuscripts involved ceremonies and rituals that supposedly allowed builders to commune with the earth itself, persuading it to rise into defensive formations. The myth of the sleeping wall appears throughout folklore from the region, describing a structure that was not built but awakened, a dormant barrier that had always existed within the earth, waiting for the proper time and circumstances to emerge. According to these stories, ancient shamans possessed the knowledge to awaken sleeping walls, calling them forth through rituals that combined earthly engineering with celestial timing. The wall would then grow slowly over generations, adding sections as needed to protect communities from threats, both seen and unseen. Korean historical texts reference walls built by the mountain spirits of the north, supernatural beings who could shape stone through will alone. These accounts describe walls that appeared overnight, constructed by beings who worked in darkness and vanished before dawn. The finished structures supposedly bore characteristics that no human building techniques could achieve perfect alignments with astronomical phenomena. Stone surfaces that remained warm even in winter, and architectural features that seemed to defy gravity. Japanese chronicles from the Heian period mention encounters with walls that had grown from the earth like bamboo, structures that expanded and contracted with seasonal changes and seemed to possess an awareness of approaching threats. These accounts describe walls that could shift their configurations, opening passages for friendly travelers while presenting insurmountable barriers to hostile forces. Even more mysterious are the fragments of myth that appear in Central Asian traditions, describing walls built by beings who came from beyond the sky, visitors from distant stars, who taught local peoples the art of permanent construction. These stories often focus on techniques for creating structures that could endure for thousands of years, incorporating materials and methods that human builders would rediscover only much later in their technological development. The consistency of these mythical elements across diverse cultures and geographical regions suggests they may preserve genuine historical memories, albeit transformed through countless retellings into the language of legend and supernatural intervention. If so, these myths may represent humanity as earliest attempts to comprehend and remember encounters with builders, whose capabilities so exceeded normal human experience that they could only be understood in terms of divine or magical intervention. As the mist swirls around ancient battlements, carrying with it the whispered echoes of countless generations of storytellers, one cannot help but wonder whether these myths preserve truths that conventional history has forgotten. Long before the first Chinese character was carved into bone or bronze before the Yellow River knew its current course, peoples whose names had been lost to time were shaping the landscape of northern China into patterns of defense and habitation that would echo through millennia. Recent archaeological discoveries have begun to illuminate these shadow builders, revealing evidence of organized societies capable of monumental construction projects that predate recognized Chinese civilization by centuries, perhaps millennia. The discovery of the Hongshan culture ruins in Inner Mongolia and northeastern China revealed sophisticated stone constructions dating to approximately 4700-2900 BCE. These ancient builders created ceremonial complexes and defensive earthworks that demonstrate advanced understanding of both engineering principles and astronomical alignments. The stone circles and platform structures found at sites like New Huliang exhibit construction techniques remarkably similar to those later employed in Great Wall construction. The same careful attention to foundation stability, the same methods for transporting and positioning massive stone blocks across challenging terrain. Even more ancient are the traces of the Yangshu culture, whose settlements dating from 5000-3000 BCE show evidence of organized defensive planning that may represent the earliest roots of Chinese wall-building traditions. Archaeological excavations at Banpo and other Yangshu sites have revealed villages surrounded by sophisticated earthwork barriers, complete with watchtowers and strategic entry points. The scale and complexity of these early defensive systems suggest communities capable of coordinating large-scale construction projects, communities that possessed both the organizational skills and technical knowledge necessary for building permanent fortifications. The Liangzhu culture, flourishing around 3,300 to 2,300 BC in the Yangtze River Delta, created massive earthwork complexes that dwarf many later Chinese construction projects. The ancient city of Liangzhu was surrounded by walls of rammed earth that in some sections reached heights of over 40 feet and stretched for miles across the landscape. The sophistication of these constructions, including advanced drainage systems, precisely calculated foundations, and evidence of standardized construction techniques, reveals capabilities that challenge conventional timelines of Chinese technological development. Perhaps most intriguing are the discoveries emerging from the Tarim Basin in western China, where mummified remains of peoples with European features have been found in association with construction sites dating back over 4,000 years. These ancient peoples, known today as the Tocharians, appear to have possessed advanced knowledge of large-scale construction techniques, including methods for building in extreme desert conditions that would later be employed in western sections of the Great Wall. Their settlements show evidence of massive defensive earthworks and stone constructions that required sophisticated engineering and significant workforce coordination. The Shang Dynasty oracle bones, among China's earliest written records, contain references to defensive structures that already existed when Shang civilization was establishing its dominance. These cryptic inscriptions speak of ancient walls of the north and barriers built by the old people, suggesting that even China's first historical dynasty encountered pre-existing fortifications whose origins were already lost in antiquity. The oracle bone inscriptions describe these structures as having been built by peoples whose names were no longer remembered, but whose constructions continued to serve defensive purposes. Recent electromagnetic surveys conducted along the Great Wall's route have revealed buried foundations and construction remnants that extend far deeper than previously suspected. Ground-penetrating radar has identified what appear to be multiple layers of construction, with the deepest showing characteristics consistent with much more ancient building techniques. These buried structures often run parallel to known wall sections, but at different elevations, suggesting construction phases separated by centuries or millennia. The discovery of what archaeologists term proto-walls has revolutionized understanding of northern China's early defensive systems. These structures, found buried beneath later constructions throughout the region, exhibit building techniques that seem to represent transitional phases between simple earthwork barriers and the sophisticated stone constructions of historical periods. Carbon dating of organic materials found within these proto-walls consistently produces dates that predate documented Chinese wall building by significant margins. Analysis of ancient pollen samples preserved in soil layers associated with early wall construction reveals environmental conditions that differed significantly from those recorded during historical building periods. The vegetation patterns suggest these early builders worked in landscapes that had experienced different climatic conditions, possibly during periods of significant environmental change that may have motivated large population movements and the construction of defensive barriers. The tools and techniques employed by these early builders show remarkable sophistication. Bronze implements discovered at pre-dynastic construction sites demonstrate advanced metallurgy and specialized tool design specifically adapted for large-scale earthwork and stone construction. The precision of these tools and their obvious specialization for construction purposes suggest communities that had developed institutional knowledge about building techniques over extended periods. Genetic analysis of human remains found at ancient construction sites reveals populations with diverse ancestral origins, suggesting that early wall-building communities may have incorporated peoples from across Central Asia, Siberia, and even more distant regions. This genetic diversity hints at extensive trade and cultural exchange networks that could have facilitated the transmission of advanced construction techniques across vast geographical areas. These builders before the builders left no written records, no dynastic chronicles, no imperial proclamations. Their legacy exists only in stone and earth, in the patient accumulation of archaeological evidence that speaks of capabilities and achievements that conventional history has yet to fully acknowledge. In the autumn of 2018, Dr. Sarah Chun was conducting routine structural analysis of Great Wall materials near Mutianyu when her attention was caught by something extraordinary embedded within the ancient masonry. What she initially assumed was decorative carving revealed itself, under closer examination, to be something far more puzzling: the fossilized remains of marine creatures, perfectly preserved within stones that had supposedly been quarried from local mountain sources. The discovery began with a single brick, its surface bearing the unmistakable spiral pattern of an ammonite fossil. The specimen was remarkably well preserved, its chambers clearly visible, and its overall structure indicating a creature that had lived in ancient seas millions of years ago. What made this discovery particularly intriguing was the brick's location embedded in a section of wall that historical records indicated had been constructed using locally quarried limestone from nearby mountains that had never been underwater during any period relevant to human civilization. As Dr. Chun expanded her investigation, she began finding similar specimens throughout the same wall section. Crinoid stems, ancient sea lily that had flourished in prehistoric oceans, appeared fossilized within the mortar itself. Archaeopod shells, some still bearing traces of their original coloration, were discovered embedded in foundation stones. Most remarkably, she found the fossilized remains of trilobites creatures that had been extinct for over 250 million years, incorporated into construction materials that were supposedly no more than a few centuries old. The implications of these discoveries were immediately apparent. Either the wall builders had transported stone materials across vast distances from geological formations that contained these fossils, or they had incorporated pre-existing structures that had been built using such materials. The logistics of the first possibility seemed almost impossibly complex. Why would builders transport heavy stone materials hundreds of miles when suitable local quarries were readily available? Chemical analysis of the fossil-bearing stones revealed mineral compositions that didn't match any known quarries in the immediate region. The limestone containing the marine fossils exhibited characteristics consistent with geological formations found in areas that would have required extensive transportation networks to access. The presence of specific mineral inclusions suggested origins in coastal regions or areas that had once been ocean floors during much earlier geological periods. More puzzling still was the discovery of stones that contained multiple fossil types from different geological eras, as if builders had accessed quarries that contained material from various prehistoric periods. Some individual stones contained both marine fossils from the Paleozoic era and plant fossils from the Mesozoic period, a combination that suggested either extraordinary geological formations or the systematic collection of materials from diverse ancient sources. The mortar binding these fossil-rich stones presented its own mysteries. Microscopic analysis revealed that the binding agent contained crushed shell fragments that appeared to be contemporaneous with the embedded fossils, suggesting that whoever had prepared the mortar had access to large quantities of fossilized marine materials. The sophistication required to process these ancient materials into effective construction components suggested builders with extensive knowledge of both geology and chemistry. Dr. Chun's team also discovered what appeared to be deliberately selected fossil specimens incorporated into the wall construction. Certain ammonite fossils were positioned in ways that suggested aesthetic consideration, placed where they would be visible on wall surfaces, or aligned in patterns that seemed to serve decorative purposes. This careful placement implied that the builders not only had access to fossilized materials, but understood their visual appeal and incorporated them intentionally into their construction designs. The discovery of fossil-bearing bricks raised questions about the sources of construction materials used throughout the Great Wall system. If builders had access to ancient fossilized materials on the scale suggested by Dr. Chun's findings, it implied either vast transportation, networks capable of moving materials across continental distances, or the existence of pre-existing structures built from such materials that were being dismantled and incorporated into later construction projects. Perhaps most intriguingly, some of the fossil-bearing stones showed signs of having been worked and shaped during periods significantly earlier than documented wall construction. Tool marks on stone surfaces appeared to have weathered for extended periods before the stones were incorporated into wall structures, suggesting they had been quarried-shaped and possibly used in earlier construction projects before being repurposed for Great Wall building. The systematic nature of fossil incorporation throughout extensive wall sections suggested this was not the result of random material selection, but represented a deliberate construction strategy. The builders seemed to have specifically sought out fossilized materials, perhaps because they recognized superior durability characteristics, or because the fossils served purposes beyond mere construction, possibly ceremonial or symbolic functions that have been lost to historical record. As news of these discoveries spread through archaeological circles, similar fossil-bearing construction materials were identified at wall sites across northern China, suggesting that the incorporation of ancient fossilized materials may have been a widespread practice rather than an isolated phenomenon, raising fundamental questions about both the sources of Great Wall construction materials and the builders' understanding of geological deep time. Beyond the northern boundaries of what would become Chinese civilization, across the vast grasslands where the wind carries the scent of wild sage and the distant thunder of horses' hooves, ancient kingdoms rose and fell like waves upon an ocean of grass. These nomadic empires, their histories largely erased by the settled civilizations that eventually overwhelmed them, may have been the true catalysts for the defensive barriers that would evolve into the Great Wall, and possibly they were builders of even earlier walls themselves. The Xiongnu Confederation, which dominated the steppes from the 3rd century BC to the 1st century CE, represents one of the most sophisticated nomadic empires in human history. Far from being simple raiders living in tents, the Xiongnu developed complex political systems, extensive trade networks, and advanced metallurgical techniques that produced weapons and tools equal to those of their settled neighbors. Archaeological evidence from Xiongnu burial sites reveals a level of cultural sophistication that challenges traditional assumptions about nomadic capabilities. The Xiongnu possessed organizational skills that enabled them to coordinate the movements of hundreds of thousands of people across distances spanning continents. This same organizational capability would have been more than sufficient for large-scale construction projects. Indeed, Chinese historical records describe Xiongnu settlements that included permanent structures built to withstand the harsh steppe winters constructions that required advanced knowledge of cold weather building techniques and access to substantial material resources. Even more ancient were the Donghu, a confederation of tribes that controlled vast territories north of China during the 7th to 2nd centuries BCE. Chinese records describe the Donghu as builders of permanent settlements and defensive structures, suggesting they possessed construction capabilities that extended beyond simple nomadic shelters. Archaeological investigations in former Donghu territories have revealed foundation remains of structures that appear to represent substantial defensive works, possibly including linear barriers designed to control movement across traditional migration routes. The Rouran Khaganate, which dominated the steppes from the 4th to 6th centuries CE, developed what may have been the most sophisticated nomadic state structure in Asian history. Their ability to maintain political control over territories, stretching from Manchuria to Central Asia, required administrative systems that could coordinate complex logistical operations across vast distances. Chinese diplomatic records describe Rouran settlements that included permanent fortifications and defensive works, suggesting these nomadic peoples were far more capable of monumental construction than traditionally assumed. Recent archaeological surveys in Mongolia have revealed evidence of linear earthwork systems that predate known Chinese wall construction by centuries. These structures, found in areas that were controlled by various nomadic confederations, exhibit construction techniques remarkably similar to those later employed in Great Wall building. The earthworks include watchtowers, beacon positions, and defensive barriers that suggest systematic approaches to territorial control that required both extensive labor coordination and sophisticated engineering knowledge. The discovery of what archaeologists term step walls has begun to revolutionize understanding of nomadic construction capabilities. These structures, found throughout Mongolia and southern Siberia, represent defensive systems that were clearly built by nomadic peoples, but which demonstrate construction techniques and organizational capabilities that rival those of settled civilizations. Some of these step walls extend for hundreds of miles, requiring coordination of labor forces and material resources on scales that challenge conventional assumptions about nomadic social organization. Genetic analysis of remains found at ancient nomadic construction sites reveals populations with diverse ancestral origins, suggesting that these steppe kingdoms incorporated peoples from across Eurasia. This genetic diversity may have included groups with specialized construction knowledge acquired from various cultural traditions, potentially explaining the sophisticated building techniques evident in nomadic defensive works. The Turkic Khaganates, which succeeded the Ruran and dominated Central Asian steppes from the 6th to 8th centuries CE, left behind construction remains that demonstrate remarkable engineering sophistication. Their stone monuments, carved with complex symbolic systems and positioned according to precise astronomical alignments, suggest builders with advanced knowledge of both construction techniques and celestial observation. The scale and precision of these monuments indicate organizational capabilities that could have supported much larger construction projects. Chinese historical records contain tantalizing references to walls encountered by Chinese armies in territories that had never been under Chinese control. These accounts describe defensive structures that were already ancient when Chinese forces first encountered them, built by peoples whose identities had been forgotten, even by local populations. The descriptions suggest substantial stone and earthwork constructions that served defensive purposes, but which had been built using techniques unfamiliar to Chinese military engineers. The trading networks that connected these nomadic kingdoms extended from the Pacific Ocean to the Mediterranean Sea, facilitating the exchange of not just goods, but knowledge and techniques across continental distances. These trade relationships could have enabled the transmission of advanced construction methods between cultures separated by thousands of miles, potentially explaining similarities between building techniques found in widely separated geographical regions. Perhaps most significantly, the cyclical nature of nomadic political systems meant that periods of confederation and empire building alternated with periods of fragmentation and migration. During times of political consolidation, these nomadic states would have possessed both the organizational capability and the strategic motivation to undertake large-scale defensive construction projects, creating barriers to protect their territories from rival confederations or to control the movement of subject populations. As archaeological research continues to reveal evidence of nomadic construction capabilities, it becomes increasingly clear that the steppes were not empty spaces between civilizations, but were themselves the locations of sophisticated societies whose builders may have created the original defensive barriers that later Chinese dynasties would expand into the structure we now call the Great Wall. In the digital age, where satellites orbit high above the Earth like modern-day celestial observers, technology has begun to reveal secrets hidden beneath China's surface for millennia. Advanced imaging systems capable of penetrating soil and vegetation to map buried structures have uncovered what researchers are calling the invisible wall. extensive linear formations that shadow the Great Wall-less path but lie buried beneath centuries of accumulated earth and vegetation. The discovery began in 2019 when NASA's Landsat satellite imagery, processed through advanced algorithmic filters designed to detect subtle ground elevation changes, revealed unusual linear patterns running parallel to known Great Wall sections. These formations, invisible to surface observation but clearly apparent in satellite data, extended for hundreds of miles across northern China, following routes that seemed to anticipate the path the Great Wall would eventually take. Ground-penetrating radar surveys conducted at sites where satellite imagery indicated buried structures confirmed the presence of substantial subsurface constructions. The radar profiles revealed walls built using rammed earth techniques, some extending 20 feet below current ground level, and showing evidence of having once stood at significant heights. The buried structures exhibited the characteristic defensive features of wall construction: regular spacing of what appeared to be tower foundations, strategic positioning to take advantage of natural topographical features, and construction methods consistent with large-scale defensive works. Dr. Liu Mingshan, leading a joint Chinese-European archaeological team, spent 3 years mapping these buried formations using a combination of satellite imagery, ground-penetrating radar, and electromagnetic surveys. His findings, published in the Journal of Archaeological Science in 2022, revealed what appeared to be an extensive network of buried defensive structures that in some areas ran for over 1,000 miles, creating a defensive system far more extensive than the visible Great Wall. The buried walls exhibited construction characteristics that puzzled researchers. While some sections showed building techniques consistent with known Chinese construction methods, others employed approaches that seemed to reflect different technological traditions. Certain buried sections incorporated large stone blocks, positioned using techniques more commonly associated with Mediterranean or Central Asian building traditions, suggesting either extensive cultural exchange or the involvement of builders with diverse technological backgrounds. Carbon dating of organic materials found within the buried wall structures consistently produced dates that preceded documented Great Wall construction by several centuries. Wood fragments preserved in the core of rammed earth sections, charcoal from what appeared to be construction fires, and other organic materials all pointed to construction periods that extended far beyond recognized historical timelines. Perhaps most intriguingly, the buried walls seemed to represent multiple construction phases, with newer sections built directly atop older ones. Stratigraphic analysis revealed up to 4 distinct building episodes at some sites, suggesting construction campaigns separated by centuries. The oldest layers, found at the greatest depths, exhibited weathering patterns that indicated exposure to surface conditions for extended periods, before being buried by later construction phases. The geographic extent of the buried wall system raised profound questions about the organizational capabilities of its builders. Electromagnetic surveys revealed buried wall sections extending into regions that historical records indicate were never under Chinese control during documented construction periods. These remote sections, found in areas of Mongolia and Central Asia that remained under nomadic control throughout most of Chinese history, suggested builders with the capability to undertake construction projects across political and cultural boundaries. Satellite analysis also revealed what appeared to be construction camps and temporary settlements associated with the buried wall system. These sites, identified through characteristic patterns of soil mineralization and vegetation growth, seemed to represent staging areas where materials had been prepared and workers housed during construction campaigns. The scale and distribution of these sites suggested construction efforts that involved thousands of workers operating across hundreds of miles of territory. The invisible wall's route, while generally following the same geographic logic as the visible Great Wall, diverged at key points to follow paths that seemed to reflect different strategic priorities. Some sections followed water sources that no longer exist, suggesting construction during periods when the regional hydrological system differed significantly from current conditions. Other sections seemed positioned to defend against threats approaching from directions that would not have been strategically significant during historically documented construction periods. Advanced computational analysis of the burial patterns provided insights into the geological processes that had concealed these structures. The accumulation of soil and sediment that buried the walls appeared to have occurred over extended periods, with some sections showing evidence of having been partially buried by natural processes before being completely covered by human activity. This suggested that at least portions of the invisible wall had been abandoned and forgotten long before the construction of the visible Great Wall. The discovery of the invisible wall system fundamentally challenged existing understanding of Great Wall construction history. Rather than representing a single construction effort or even a series of related projects, the evidence suggested a building tradition that had persisted across multiple centuries and possibly millennia, with each generation of builders incorporating and expanding upon the work of their predecessors. As mapping of the invisible wall continues, each new revelation seems to push the origins of China's great defensive system deeper into antiquity, suggesting that what we see today may represent only the most recent iteration of a construction tradition whose true beginnings remain hidden beneath the patient accumulation of geological time. 20,000 years ago, during the height of the last ice age, northern China existed in a world so different from today that it might as well have been an alien planet. Vast ice sheets stretched across Siberia. Sea levels stood hundreds of feet lower than current levels, and the climate patterns that shaped human settlement across Asia bore little resemblance to those recorded in historical accounts. Understanding this ancient climate may hold the key to unraveling the true age of China's great defensive system. Paleoclimatological research has revealed that during the last glacial maximum, the regions where the Great Wall now stands experienced environmental conditions that would have supported much larger human populations than previously assumed. The Ordos Desert, which today presents a formidable barrier to settlement, was during glacial periods a temperate grassland capable of supporting extensive agricultural communities. Rivers that are now seasonal streams flowed year-round, providing reliable water sources for permanent settlements. Core samples extracted from ancient lake beds in northern China reveal pollen records that paint a picture of landscape transformation spanning millennia. During interglacial periods, when global temperatures warmed, the region supported dense forests and abundant wildlife. During glacial advances, the landscape transformed into steppes that provided ideal conditions for both nomadic herders and settled agricultural communities. These cyclical environmental changes would have triggered massive population movements and created strategic needs for defensive structures. The Younger Dryas period, a temporary return to glacial conditions that occurred approximately 12,900 to 11,700 years ago, may have been particularly significant for early wall construction. This rapid climate change event, which occurred at the end of the last ice age, would have disrupted established settlement patterns across northern Asia, potentially forcing different populations into conflict over remaining habitable territories. The need for defensive barriers during such periods of environmental stress could have motivated construction projects on scales that would seem impossible under normal circumstances. Evidence from ice cores extracted in Tibet and Mongolia indicates that the climate transitions at the end of the Ice Age were not gradual but occurred in dramatic pulses that could transform regional environments within decades. These rapid changes would have created refugee populations seeking new territories and would have placed tremendous pressure on existing communities to defend their resources. Archaeological evidence of human settlement during these transitional periods suggests populations with the organizational capability and technological knowledge necessary for large-scale construction projects. The discovery of ancient shorelines and river channels buried beneath current Great Wall sections provides direct evidence of construction during periods of significantly different environmental conditions. Geological surveys have revealed that some wall sections were built across valleys that once contained permanent rivers, suggesting construction during climatic periods when regional hydrology differed markedly from historical conditions. The positioning of these ancient sections implies builders who understood landscape features that no longer exist. Dendrochronological analysis of preserved wood found in wall construction has revealed growth patterns that indicate the trees were growing during periods of different climatic conditions than those recorded during historical construction phases. Tree rings from wood samples embedded in foundation layers show patterns consistent with cooler, wetter conditions that occurred during transitional periods at the end of the Ice Age. This evidence suggests construction activities during climatic conditions that had not occurred since prehistoric times. Studies of ancient human migration patterns reveal population movements that correlate with major climate transitions. Genetic analysis of modern populations in northern China shows evidence of ancestry from groups that migrated into the region during post-glacial periods, suggesting waves of population movement that would have created territorial pressures requiring defensive responses. The scale of these prehistoric migrations would have been sufficient to motivate construction projects comparable to the Great Wall. The preservation of construction materials in wall foundations provides additional evidence of building during different climatic conditions. Organic materials that could not have survived under current environmental conditions have been found preserved in wall cores, suggesting construction and abandonment during periods when the regional climate was sufficiently different to allow such preservation. The chemistry of these preserved materials indicates environmental conditions that have not occurred in the region during historically documented periods. Analysis of sediment cores from along the Great Wall S route reveals evidence of significant environmental changes that occurred after initial construction phases. Layers of wind-blown sediment, flood deposits, and volcanic ash found above foundation levels indicate that wall sections were built, used, and then abandoned during periods of environmental upheaval that preceded documented Chinese construction campaigns by millennia. Perhaps most significantly, computer modeling of population dynamics during post-glacial climate transitions suggests that northern China would have supported much larger human populations during certain prehistoric periods than during historically documented times. These larger populations would have possessed both the workforce and the organizational imperative necessary for monumental construction projects, particularly during periods of territorial competition driven by environmental change. The climate puzzle suggests that the Great Wall as origins may extend back to periods when environmental pressures created both the necessity and the opportunity for construction projects that would have seemed impossible during the more stable climatic conditions of historical times. If so, the wall we see today may represent the latest phase of a defensive system whose origins lie in humanity's response to the environmental challenges of a very different world. In the deep silence of Mountain Dawn, where mist rises from valleys carved by glaciers that retreated before human memory began, the stones of the Great Wall hold vigil over secrets that span geological ages. Each block of limestone and granite serves as a repository of time itself, containing within its crystalline structure the compressed history of epochs when continents drifted and seas rose and fell across landscapes that would one day shelter human civilizations. The limestone blocks that form much of the Great Wall's foundation contain fossilized remains of creatures that lived in ancient seas hundreds of millions of years ago. These stones remember when northern China lay beneath tropical oceans, when the first complex life forms were evolving in primordial waters. The calcite crystals that bind these fossils together formed under pressure and heat that transformed organic remains into permanent stone memorials, creating materials that would outlast empires and civilizations. Within the granite sections quarried from mountain peaks, feldspar and quartz crystals preserve records of the Earth's deep processes The slow cooling of magma chambers, the gradual uplift of mountain ranges the patient, weathering that exposed ancient rock formations to human discovery. These igneous stones contain isotopic signatures that tell stories of the planet's geological evolution, making each wall section a library of deep time written in the language of minerals and crystal structures. The patina that coats the wall's surface stones records centuries of interaction with wind, rain, and temperature cycles. Chemical analysis of these weathered surfaces reveals not just the passage of time, but the specific environmental conditions the stones have experienced. Microscopic examination shows layers of mineral deposits that accumulated like tree rings, each representing years or decades of exposure to particular climatic conditions. Perhaps most remarkably, the stones themselves exhibit characteristics that suggest they have experienced multiple cycles of construction, weathering, and reconstruction. Tool marks on stone surfaces show evidence of having been worked during different historical periods, with some marks weathered to near invisibility, while others remain sharp and clear. This layered history of human interaction with stone suggests building traditions that extended across much longer periods than conventional historical records indicate. The mortar that binds the wall stones contains its own temporal memories. Mineral analysis reveals chemical compositions that changed over time as builders adapted their techniques to available materials and changing environmental conditions. Some mortar samples show evidence of having been mixed with organic additives that have long since decomposed, leaving behind molecular signatures that can be read like ancient recipes preserved in stone. The positioning of stones within wall structures reveals sophisticated understanding of geological principles that extended beyond mere construction technique. Load-bearing stones were selected and positioned to take advantage of their internal crystal structures, distributing weight along planes of strength that suggest builders who understood the hidden architecture within stone itself. This knowledge implies construction traditions that had developed over extended periods of experimentation and refinement. Microscopic analysis of stone surfaces reveals evidence of construction tools and techniques that evolved over long periods. Different sections of the wall show tool marks, characteristic of bronze implements, iron tools, and steel instruments, suggesting construction campaigns that spanned technological transitions. The progression of tool marks provides a chronological record of technological development that extends beyond documented historical periods. The stones also preserve evidence of the human hands that shaped them. Fingerprints pressed into mortar while it was still wet, the distinctive patterns of hammer blows from individual craftsmen, and even textile impressions from clothing worn by ancient builders have been found preserved in construction materials throughout the wall system. These intimate human traces create direct connections across centuries between modern observers and the individuals who labored to create this monumental structure. Thermal analysis of wall stones reveals temperature histories that extend far beyond recent historical periods. Some stones show evidence of having been exposed to extreme heat, followed by gradual cooling, suggesting they may have been incorporated into earlier structures that were damaged by fire or warfare before being reused in later construction phases. The thermal signatures preserved in stone provide records of events that occurred long before written historical accounts. The acoustic properties of wall sections also preserve temporal information. The way sound reverberates through different stone configurations reveals construction techniques that varied over time, with some sections built to amplify acoustic signals, while others seem designed to muffle sound. These acoustic characteristics suggest functional requirements that changed over different historical periods, indicating construction campaigns with different strategic priorities. The magnetic properties of iron-rich stones provide additional temporal clues. The orientation of magnetic minerals within construction materials reflects the Earth's magnetic field at the time of construction, creating a chronological signature that can be read by paleomagnetic analysis. These magnetic records provide independent dating evidence that often extends construction timelines. beyond those suggested by conventional historical sources. As morning light illuminates the ancient stones, revealing the patient accumulation of ages written in mineral and crystal, the Great Wall stands revealed not just as a human construction, but as a collaboration between human ambition and geological deep time, a structure where the memory of stone extends, the memory of civilization into realms that conventional history has yet to explore. Long before Marco Polo's footsteps echoed across the mountains and deserts of Central Asia, ancient trade routes wove through the heart of the continent like golden threads connecting civilizations, separated by thousands of miles. The relationship between these trading networks and the Great Wall system reveals a connection far more complex than simple border defense, one that suggests the wall may have evolved, not just to keep invaders out, but to control and protect commerce that predated the Silk Road itself by millennia. Archaeological evidence from oasis cities along the Taklamakan desert reveals trading settlements that flourished during periods much earlier than the traditionally recognized beginning of Silk Road commerce. Carbon dating of organic materials from sites like Nia and Lulan indicates continuous occupation and commercial activity, extending back over 4,000 years, suggesting trade networks that operated across Central Asia long before the Han Dynasty's official establishment of Silk Road protocols in the 2nd century BCE. The positioning of certain Great Wall sections reflects strategic considerations that make sense only in the context of protecting established trade routes. Remote wall segments found in areas that seem militarily insignificant prove to be positioned at key points. Along ancient travel corridors, mountain passes where traders would have been vulnerable to attack, oasis locations where caravans would have stopped for water and supplies, and river crossings that provided the only practical routes through otherwise impassable terrain. Recent discoveries in the Gobi Desert have revealed the remains of what appear to be fortified caravanserais trading posts built with defensive features, remarkably similar to Great Wall construction techniques. These structures, dating to periods that predate documented Silk Road establishment, suggest that fortified trading infrastructure existed along Trans-Asian routes long before official diplomatic and commercial agreements created the classical Silk Road system. The technological exchanges evident in Great Wall construction provide additional evidence of ancient trade connections. Building techniques found in Western Wall sections show clear influences from Persian, Central Asian, and even Mediterranean construction traditions. The appearance of these foreign engineering approaches in Chinese defensive works suggests extensive cultural contact and knowledge exchange that could only have occurred through established trading relationships. Mineralogical analysis of construction materials used in Western Great Wall sections reveals stones and minerals that originated from deposits hundreds of miles away, some from regions that would have required crossing international boundaries to access. The presence of these exotic materials suggests either extensive trading networks capable of transporting heavy construction materials across continental distances, or the incorporation of pre-existing structures built by peoples with access to diverse mineral resources. The discovery of ancient coins and trade goods embedded in Great Wall foundations provides direct evidence of commercial activity during construction periods. Coins from Sogdian city-states, Persian empires, and even Roman territories have been found in wall construction, contexts that predate documented contact between these civilizations and China. These artifacts suggest trading relationships that extended far beyond officially recorded diplomatic contacts. Genetic analysis of human remains found at wall construction sites reveals populations with ancestral connections to Central Asian, Middle Eastern, and European groups, indicating the presence of peoples who had migrated along trade routes to participate in wall construction projects. This genetic diversity suggests that wall building may have been an international enterprise that drew workers and expertise from across the known world. The astronomical alignments found in certain wall sections reflect knowledge of stellar observations that were particularly important for navigation across the featureless expanses of Central Asian deserts. These alignments suggest that wall builders possessed detailed knowledge of celestial navigation, techniques that would have been essential for long-distance trade, but unnecessary for purely defensive purposes. Ancient Chinese texts contain references to tribute payments and trade agreements with peoples described as dwelling beyond the northern walls, descriptions that imply the existence of established trading relationships with communities that lay beyond existing defensive barriers. These accounts suggest that walls served not just defensive purposes, but also functioned as customs barriers and control points for regulating commercial traffic. The preservation of organic materials in dry western wall sections has yielded artifacts that provide direct evidence of ancient trade goods. Silk fragments, spices, precious stones, and worked metals found within wall construction. Contexts date to periods that extend the history of Trans-Asian commerce far beyond traditionally recognized timelines. These materials suggest that luxury trade across the continent was well established, centuries before the classical Silk Road period. The spacing and positioning of beacon towers along western wall sections follow patterns that seem designed less for military communication and more for guiding and protecting commercial traffic. The sight lines between towers often correspond to natural rest stops where caravans would have camped, suggesting that the beacon system served navigational purposes for friendly traders, as well as defensive functions against hostile raiders. Perhaps most significantly, recent archaeological surveys have identified what appear to be ancient roadways running parallel to buried wall sections, routes that show evidence of heavy traffic from wheeled vehicles and pack animals over extended periods. These ancient highways, preserved beneath desert sands, suggest that the wall system was built to support and protect established transportation networks rather than simply to create defensive barriers. The emerging picture suggests that the Great Wall system may have evolved not as a simple defensive barrier, but as a complex infrastructure project designed to support and control transcontinental commerce that connected Chinese civilization with trading partners from across the known world, partnerships that may have existed for millennia before they were officially recorded in the diplomatic chronicles of imperial dynasties. Dr. Zhang Wei had spent 15 years analyzing historical construction materials when she first encountered the mortar that would challenge everything she thought she knew about ancient Chinese building techniques. Working with samples taken from foundation repairs near Jiangkou, she expected to find the familiar composition of lime, rice flour, and egg whites that characterized Ming Dynasty construction. Instead, her chemical analysis revealed something extraordinary, a binding agent that exhibited properties that modern science was only beginning to understand. The mortar samples, extracted from the deepest foundation layers of a section that historical records attributed to 15th century Ming construction, contained molecular structures that seemed to defy conventional understanding of historical building materials. Spectroscopic analysis revealed the presence of organic polymers that created chemical bonds between mineral components in ways that had no parallel in documented ancient construction techniques. The resulting material exhibited flexibility and durability, characteristics that exceeded modern concrete in several important respects. Under electron microscope examination, the ancient mortar revealed a microstructure that resembled advanced composite materials more than traditional lime-based binding agents. The organic and mineral components were integrated at the molecular level in patterns that suggested sophisticated understanding of chemical bonding principles. Most remarkably, the mortar seemed to have self-healing properties. Microscopic cracks that had developed over centuries showed evidence of having partially sealed themselves through ongoing chemical processes. Chemical analysis identified the organic component as glutinous rice, but rice that had been processed using techniques that amplified its binding properties far beyond what conventional preparation methods could achieve. The rice had been fermented using processes that created complex protein chains, capable of forming molecular bonds with limestone and other mineral components. The resulting chemical matrix exhibited elasticity that allowed wall sections to flex during earthquakes and temperature changes without structural failure. The sophistication of the mortar preparation process became apparent through careful analysis of mineral additives that had been incorporated into the binding agent. Ground oyster shells, processed volcanic ash, and fibrous plant materials had been combined in precise proportions that created chemical reactions, producing binding agents stronger than the stones they held together. The knowledge required to achieve such chemical precision suggested building traditions that had evolved over extended periods of experimentation and refinement. Perhaps most puzzling was the discovery that different wall sections employed subtly different mortar formulations that seemed adapted to specific environmental conditions. Mortar used in sections exposed to extreme temperature. Variations contained additives that provided enhanced thermal stability. Wall sections in areas prone to seismic activity utilized formulations that provided greater flexibility. This level of technical sophistication suggested systematic scientific approaches to construction that challenged assumptions about ancient technical capabilities. Dr. Zhang's team also discovered evidence that the ancient builders had developed quality testing procedures for their mortar. Analysis of construction sites revealed areas where small batches of mortar had been prepared and tested before being used in actual wall construction. These test sites contained samples of mortar formulations that had been systematically varied to optimize strength, durability, and environmental resistance. The existence of such testing protocols implied construction management systems that employed systematic engineering approaches. The molecular analysis revealed that the ancient mortar contained trace amounts of rare earth elements that could only have been obtained from specific geological formations. These elements appeared to serve as catalysts that enhanced the chemical bonding process, suggesting that ancient builders had access to sophisticated knowledge about chemical enhancement of construction materials. The sources of these rare minerals were located hundreds of miles from construction sites, indicating extensive supply networks dedicated to acquiring specialized construction materials. Carbon dating of organic materials within the mortar samples consistently produced dates that exceeded the age of wall sections where they were found by several centuries. Wood fibers, plant materials, and other organic additives showed evidence of having been prepared and aged before incorporation into mortar batches, suggesting preparation processes that extended over decades. This evidence implied construction planning and material preparation systems that operated on much longer timescales than conventional construction projects. The preservation characteristics of the ancient mortar provided additional mysteries. Despite centuries of exposure to extreme weather conditions, many samples retained chemical properties that closely resembled freshly prepared material. The binding agents seemed to maintain their molecular integrity over time through chemical processes that continued to operate centuries after initial construction. This longevity suggested formulations that incorporated understanding of long-term chemical stability that modern material science was only beginning to comprehend. Most remarkably, attempts to replicate the ancient mortar using traditional ingredients and preparation methods consistently failed to achieve the same chemical and physical properties. Modern chemists working with detailed analysis of ancient samples could identify individual components, but could not reproduce the molecular level integration that gave the original material its superior characteristics. The ancient preparation techniques appeared to involve processes that had been lost to historical record. The discovery of standardized mortar recipes carved into stone tablets at several construction sites provided evidence of systematic knowledge preservation systems. These tablets contained detailed instructions for material preparation, including specific timing requirements, temperature controls, and quality indicators that guided the preparation process. The existence of such documentation suggested institutional knowledge systems that preserved technical information across generations of builders. As Dr. Zhang continued her analysis, each new discovery seemed to reveal additional layers of technical sophistication that pushed the boundaries of what historians believed possible for ancient construction techniques, suggesting that the builders of the Great Wall possessed scientific knowledge that modern engineering was only beginning to rediscover. Across the ancient world, from the sun-baked plains of Mesopotamia to the windswept highlands of Scotland, human civilizations independently developed the practice of building monumental walls, defensive barriers that served not just military purposes, but represented the technological and organizational capabilities of their creators. The global prevalence of ancient wall-building traditions raises profound questions about whether the Great Wall of China emerged from purely local circumstances or reflects participation in a worldwide pattern of monumental construction that may have deeper, more ancient origins than conventional history acknowledges. The walls of Jericho, dating to approximately 8000 BCE, represent some of the earliest known monumental defensive structures. These massive stone barriers, standing over 12 feet high and extending for hundreds of yards, required organizational capabilities and construction techniques that challenge assumptions about Neolithic technological development. The sophistication of Jericho's defensive system, including towers, gates, and interior support structures, suggests knowledge traditions that may have influenced wall-building practices across much wider geographical areas. In ancient Sumer, the city-states of Uruk, Ur, and Babylon were surrounded by massive defensive walls that incorporated advanced engineering techniques, remarkably similar to those later employed in Chinese wall construction. The walls of Babylon, described by ancient historians as among the wonders of the world, utilized standardized brick construction, sophisticated foundation systems, and defensive features that paralleled developments in Chinese fortification design. The similarity of techniques suggests either extensive cultural exchange or development from common technological traditions. The Hadrian's Wall system in Britain, built by Roman engineers during the 2nd century CE, exhibits construction techniques and strategic thinking that show striking parallels to Great Wall design principles. The use of standardized construction materials, the integration of natural topographical features into defensive planning, and the employment of beacon systems for long-distance communication all reflect approaches that appeared in Chinese wall construction during similar time periods. The coincidence of such specific technical similarities suggests possible knowledge exchange between distant civilizations. The ancient walls of Troy, revealed through archaeological excavation to represent multiple construction phases spanning over a millennium, show evolution of defensive techniques that parallel the development of Chinese wall-building practices. The progression from simple earth and stone barriers to sophisticated multi-layered defensive systems reflects technological development that followed similar patterns in widely separated geographical regions. This parallel evolution suggests either shared knowledge traditions or underlying principles of defensive construction that were independently discovered by multiple civilizations. In the Americas, the extensive wall systems built by ancient Andean civilizations exhibit construction techniques that show remarkable similarities to Chinese methods despite the apparent impossibility of cultural contact. The walls of Sacsayhuaman near Cusco, Peru, built using precisely fitted stone blocks without mortar, required engineering knowledge and organizational capabilities that paralleled those employed in Great Wall construction. The precision of stone fitting and the scale of construction suggest technical knowledge that may have derived from common ancient sources. The defensive walls of ancient Zimbabwe, built during the 11th to 15th centuries CE, incorporated construction techniques that employed curved stone walls and sophisticated drainage systems remarkably similar to techniques found in Chinese defensive works. The builders of Great Zimbabwe demonstrated understanding of foundation engineering and wall stability that paralleled Chinese techniques developed during similar time periods, suggesting either remarkable coincidence or knowledge transmission across continental distances. The Cyclopean walls of ancient Greece, built using massive stone blocks fitted together without mortar, required construction techniques that demanded sophisticated understanding of engineering principles. The precision of stone cutting and the methods for moving and positioning massive blocks show technological approaches that paralleled Chinese stoneworking techniques. The scale and ambition of these ancient Greek constructions suggest participation in building traditions that extended across multiple civilizations. Archaeological evidence from wall construction sites across different continents reveals remarkably similar tool types and construction techniques. Stone cutting implements, lifting devices, and transportation methods show convergent technological development that suggests either extensive ancient trade networks that facilitated knowledge exchange or development from common technological traditions that predated historically documented civilizations. The astronomical alignments found in ancient walls across different continents provide additional evidence of shared knowledge traditions. Wall sections in locations as diverse as China, Britain, and Peru show orientations that correspond to significant celestial events, suggesting builders who possessed similar astronomical knowledge and employed similar methods for incorporating celestial observations into construction planning. The consistency of such alignments across geographically separated cultures implies knowledge systems that transcended individual civilizations. The preservation of similar construction techniques across multiple millennia and continental distances suggests the existence of ancient knowledge traditions that may have been much more widespread and sophisticated than conventional history acknowledges. The technical requirements for monumental wall construction, understanding of engineering principles, organizational systems for coordinating large workforces, and techniques for quarrying and transporting massive materials represent knowledge systems that may have been shared across ancient civilizations through networks that have been lost to historical record. Perhaps most significantly, the timing of major wall construction projects across different continents shows correlations that seem to exceed statistical probability. Periods of intensive wall building in China often corresponded to similar construction booms in Europe, the Middle East, and the Americas, suggesting either shared responses to common global challenges or coordination through communication networks that conventional history has yet to recognize. The global tradition of monumental wall construction suggests that the Great Wall of China may represent not an isolated achievement of Chinese civilization, but participation in a worldwide pattern of construction that reflects ancient knowledge systems and organizational capabilities that extended far beyond individual cultures and civilizations. On certain mornings, when the angle of sunlight strikes the Great Wall at precisely the correct inclination, shadows fall across ancient stones in patterns that seem too deliberate to be accidental. These astronomical alignments, discovered through decades of careful observation and measurement, suggest that the wall as builders possessed sophisticated knowledge of celestial mechanics and may have incorporated astronomical functions into what has traditionally been understood as purely military architecture. The discovery of astronomical alignments in Great Wall construction began with observations made by Dr. David Chun, an archaeoastronomer from the Chinese Academy of Sciences during the winter solstice of 2001. Working at the Mutianyu section, Dr. Chun noticed that specific wall segments were oriented to frame the sunrise on the shortest day of the year, creating sightlines that precisely captured the sun's position at this astronomically significant moment. Further investigation revealed that this alignment was not unique, but appeared at multiple wall locations across northern China. Systematic surveys conducted over subsequent years identified wall sections that aligned with summer solstice events, equinox positions, and the rising points of significant stars and constellations. The precision of these alignments exceeded what could be achieved through coincidence, suggesting that astronomical considerations had been deliberately incorporated into wall construction planning. The builders appeared to have possessed detailed knowledge of solar and stellar cycles, that enabled them to create permanent stone markers for celestial events. The integration of astronomical functions into defensive architecture required construction capabilities that went far beyond simple military engineering. Achieving precise celestial alignments across hundreds of miles of wall construction demanded systematic astronomical observation, mathematical calculation of solar and stellar positions, and surveying techniques capable of translating astronomical data into construction specifications. The knowledge systems required for such work suggest builders who were as much scientists as engineers. Carbon dating of wall sections with astronomical alignments has produced dates that consistently exceed those suggested by historical construction records. Organic materials found within astronomically aligned wall segments often date to periods several centuries earlier than documented construction campaigns, suggesting that astronomical wall building may represent traditions that extended much deeper into antiquity and conventionally recognized. The astronomical alignments serve functions beyond simple calendar marking. Certain wall segments appear to have been designed as observation platforms that enabled systematic study of celestial phenomena. Stone seats carved into wall parapets provide comfortable positions for extended sky watching, while precisely positioned openings in wall structures frame specific portions of the sky for detailed observation. These features suggest that wall sections served as functional astronomical observatories. The discovery of star maps carved into stones within wall construction provides direct evidence of the builder's astronomical knowledge. These petroglyphs, found at multiple wall locations, depict constellation patterns with accuracy that demonstrates detailed familiarity with stellar positions and movements. Some carvings include mathematical notations that appear to represent calculations related to predicting celestial events, suggesting that wall sites served as centers for astronomical computation. The positioning of beacon towers along the wall system shows correlations with stellar alignments that extend beyond practical communication requirements. Many towers are positioned at locations that provide optimal viewing of specific star groups that were significant in ancient Chinese astronomy. The sightlines between towers often correspond to the paths of celestial objects across the night sky, suggesting that the beacon system served astronomical as well as military communication functions. Archaeological excavations at wall construction sites have uncovered bronze instruments that appear to be astronomical calculation devices. These artifacts, found in contexts associated with wall building activities, include armillary spheres, sundials, and measuring instruments that would have been essential for incorporating astronomical alignments into construction planning. The sophistication of these devices suggests builders who are trained in advanced astronomical techniques. The integration of lunar cycles into wall construction scheduling provides additional evidence of astronomical sophistication. Analysis of construction materials reveals that certain building activities were timed to coincide with specific lunar phases, apparently to take advantage of tidal effects that influence the setting properties of lime-based mortar. This level of astronomical integration into construction planning suggests builders who understood subtle connections between celestial cycles and practical building techniques. The astronomical wall concept is supported by discoveries of similar celestial alignments in ancient wall systems across other cultures. Hadrian's Wall in Britain, the walls of ancient Babylon, and defensive structures in the Americas all show evidence of astronomical orientations that parallel those found in Chinese wall construction. The worldwide occurrence of astronomical wall building suggests participation in knowledge traditions that transcended individual civilizations. Perhaps most significantly, computer modeling of ancient sky conditions reveals that certain wall alignments correspond to stellar positions that occurred during periods much earlier than documented construction dates. The precession of the Earth's axis causes stellar positions to shift over time, meaning that alignments designed for specific star positions can be dated by calculating when those alignments would have been accurate. These calculations consistently suggest construction during periods that predate historical records by centuries or millennia. The astronomical wall evidence suggests that the Great Wall system represented far more than defensive architecture, that it functioned as a massive astronomical instrument designed for scientific observation and calendar calculation, built by people whose understanding of celestial mechanics exceeded what conventional history attributes to ancient Chinese civilization. In the deepest archives of human memory, where myth and history converge, in the shadowy borderlands of collective consciousness, persistent legends speak of advanced civilizations that vanished so completely that only fragments of their knowledge remain embedded in the traditions of later cultures. Could it be that the sophisticated construction techniques evident in the Great Wall, as most ancient sections, represent not the independent achievement of Chinese civilization, but rather the inheritance of technologies developed by peoples whose very existence has been erased from conventional historical record? The concept of a lost advanced civilization, popularized in Plato's account of Atlantis, but appearing in various forms across cultures worldwide, has long been dismissed by mainstream archaeology as mere fantasy. Yet recent discoveries of sophisticated ancient structures in locations as diverse as Turkey's Göbekli Tepe and Russia's Archaeum suggest that human technological capabilities during prehistoric periods may have been far more advanced than traditionally assumed. The implications for understanding Great Wall construction are profound. Göbekli Tepe, dated to approximately 9,500 BCE, demonstrates construction capabilities that challenge fundamental assumptions about Neolithic technological development. The site's massive stone pillars, precisely carved relief sculptures, and sophisticated architectural planning required organizational systems and technical knowledge that approached those necessary for Great Wall construction. The existence of such capabilities during prehistoric periods suggests that advanced construction knowledge may have been more widespread in the ancient world than previously recognized. Archaeological investigations at sites across Eurasia have revealed evidence of ancient construction techniques that seem to reflect common technological traditions, despite vast geographical separations. Stone cutting methods, foundation engineering principles, and architectural planning approaches show similarities that suggest either extensive ancient trade networks or derivation from common technological sources. The persistence of such techniques across multiple millennia implies knowledge preservation systems that conventional history has yet to acknowledge. The discovery of anomalously ancient dates associated with Great Wall construction gains additional significance when considered alongside evidence of advanced prehistoric civilizations elsewhere in the world. If sophisticated construction capabilities existed during periods much earlier than traditionally assumed, then the presence of ancient construction techniques in Great Wall building becomes less surprising and more consistent with a broader pattern of advanced prehistoric technological development. Genetic studies of modern populations across Eurasia reveal evidence of ancient migration patterns that correlate with the highest distribution of advanced construction techniques. Population movements during post-glacial periods appear to have followed routes that connect regions where sophisticated ancient construction is found, suggesting that knowledge of advanced building techniques may have been transmitted through prehistoric migration networks. The builders of the Great Wall may have inherited their capabilities from these ancient migration traditions. The consistency of certain construction approaches across widely separated ancient cultures suggests the possibility of common technological origins that predate historically documented civilizations. The use of precision stone fitting the integration of astronomical alignments into architectural planning, and the employment of advanced foundation engineering techniques appear in ancient constructions across multiple continents, implying knowledge systems that may have derived from shared ancient sources. Linguistic analysis reveals that technical construction terminology shows surprising similarities across cultures that supposedly had no historical contact. Words related to stoneworking, architectural planning, and construction management show linguistic relationships that suggest either ancient, cultural connections or derivation from common prehistoric languages. These linguistic connections parallel the technological similarities found in construction techniques, reinforcing the possibility of shared ancient knowledge traditions. The timing of major construction projects across different ancient civilizations shows correlations that seem to exceed statistical probability. Periods of intensive monumental building in China, the Middle East, Europe, and the Americas often coincided in ways that suggest either coordinated responses to common challenges or communication through networks that conventional history has not recognized. Such coordination would require organizational capabilities and communication systems that approach those attributed to lost advanced civilizations. The astronomical knowledge demonstrated in Great Wall construction parallels sophisticated celestial observation capabilities found in other ancient cultures worldwide. The precision of astronomical alignments, the integration of complex calendar systems into construction planning, and the use of celestial cycles for timing construction activities suggest knowledge systems that may have been more advanced and more widespread in the ancient world than conventional history acknowledges. Perhaps most significantly, the environmental conditions that existed during the periods when the most sophisticated Great Wall construction techniques were apparently developed correspond to global climate transitions that would have created exactly the conditions described in legends of lost civilizations. Post-glacial flooding, rapid climate changes, and massive population displacements could have destroyed advanced prehistoric societies while scattering their survivors and their knowledge across the globe. The possibility that Great Wall construction techniques derived from lost advanced civilizations does not require accepting fantastical claims about prehistoric technology. Instead, it suggests that human organizational capabilities, construction knowledge, and scientific understanding may have developed earlier and spread more widely than conventional historical models acknowledge. The Great Wall may represent not the beginning of advanced construction capabilities in China, but rather their continuation from much more ancient origins. If the echoes of advanced prehistoric civilizations can indeed be detected in Great Wall construction, then the monument stands not just as testimony to Chinese achievement, but as evidence of human capabilities that extended far deeper into antiquity than official history has yet been willing to recognize. Beyond the northern reaches of the Great Wall, where the structure's final watchtowers peer across landscapes that seem to stretch infinitely toward Arctic horizons, lie the remains of settlements that challenge our understanding of who lived where and when in the vast borderlands between civilization and wilderness. These ghost cities, revealed through satellite imagery and confirmed by archaeological survey, represent communities that thrived in regions that historical records suggest should have been empty. Settlements whose existence implies populations purposes and construction capabilities that extend far beyond officially recognized timelines of human habitation in northern China. The discovery of these abandoned settlements began with analysis of high-resolution satellite imagery conducted by Dr. Elena Petrov, a Russian archaeologist specializing in Central Asian civilizations. Working with Google Earth data in 2015, Dr. Petrov identified geometric patterns in the Mongolian steppes that resembled urban planning regular street grids, rectangular building foundations, and defensive perimeters that suggested organized communities rather than random nomadic camps. Ground surveys confirmed the presence of substantial stone foundations, sophisticated drainage systems, and evidence of permanent occupation that extended over centuries. The largest of these ghost cities, designated Site 7 by archaeological teams, covers an area of over 2 square miles and shows evidence of having supported a population of several thousand people. The settlement's layout reveals urban planning principles that parallel those found in documented Chinese cities from much later period central administrative areas, organized residential districts, and specialized craft quarters that suggest a complex economic system. Carbon dating of organic materials found in construction contexts produces dates that consistently predate historically documented Chinese expansion into the region by several centuries. The construction techniques employed in these northern settlements show remarkable sophistication for communities that supposedly existed beyond the reach of Chinese civilization. Building foundations utilize advanced engineering principles that required understanding of permafrost construction challenges, earthquake resistance, and extreme weather durability. The builders employed methods for creating stable foundations in shifting soils and developed heating systems that enabled comfortable habitation during harsh steppe winters. Archaeological investigation of the ghost cities has revealed artifact assemblages that suggest extensive trade connections spanning continents. Chinese silk, Mediterranean glasswork, Central Asian metalwork, and Arctic ivory have all been found in settlement contexts, indicating commercial networks that connected these remote communities with civilizations across the known world. The volume and diversity of trade goods suggests settlements that served as major commercial hubs rather than simple border outposts. The defensive systems surrounding these settlements provide evidence of military capabilities that challenge assumptions about nomadic warfare. Stone fortifications, strategic positioning to control river crossings and mountain passes, and sophisticated early warning systems suggest military engineering knowledge that rivaled capabilities of settled civilizations. The scale of defensive works implies communities that faced sustained military threats and possessed the organizational capacity to mount effective resistance. Perhaps most intriguingly, the ghost cities show evidence of having been connected to the Great Wall system through communication networks that extended far beyond the wall as physical terminus. Beacon towers and signal relay stations found at these northern sites align with Great Wall communication systems, suggesting that the wall's defensive and communication functions extended much deeper into nomadic territories than previously recognized. These connections imply that the wall system was part of a much larger strategic network that encompassed settlements and peoples far beyond Chinese political control. The timing of abandonment of these ghost cities correlates with major climate transitions that affected the entire northern Eurasian steppe. Paleoclimate data indicates that the settlements were abandoned during periods of increasing aridity and cooling temperatures that would have made agricultural subsistence increasingly difficult. The pattern of abandonment suggests that these communities were agricultural settlements rather than purely nomadic camps, implying a level of sedentary civilization in the northern steppes that historical records do not acknowledge. Genetic analysis of human remains found at the ghost city sites reveals populations with diverse ancestral origins that included Chinese, Central Asian, European, and Siberian genetic markers. This genetic diversity suggests communities that incorporated peoples from across the Eurasian continent, creating multicultural settlements that served as melting pots for different technological and cultural traditions. The integration of diverse populations implies social and political systems capable of managing complex multicultural communities. The agricultural systems that supported these northern settlements show evidence of advanced farming techniques adapted to extreme northern conditions. Excavation has revealed irrigation systems, crop storage facilities, and evidence of selective breeding programs that developed cold-resistant varieties of grain crops. The sophistication of these agricultural systems suggests knowledge traditions that had evolved over extended periods of experimentation and refinement in extreme environmental conditions. The craft production evidence found at ghost city sites indicates specialized manufacturing capabilities that exceeded simple subsistence needs. Metalworking facilities, textile production areas, and pottery workshops show evidence of mass production techniques that suggest manufacturing for export rather than local consumption. The scale of production implies economic systems that were integrated into broader trading networks spanning continental distances. As archaeologists continue to investigate these northern ghost cities, Each new discovery seems to push the boundaries of known human habitation and civilization deeper into regions and time periods that conventional history suggests should have been beyond the reach of organized human communities, raising fundamental questions about the true extent and sophistication of ancient civilizations in the regions where the Great Wall marked the supposed boundary between civilization and wilderness. In the summer of 2019, marine archaeologist Dr. Liu Heiken was conducting routine sonar surveys of Bohai Bay when his instruments detected something extraordinary beneath 30 feet of murky coastal water. Geometric patterns on the seafloor that bore an unmistakable resemblance to wall construction. What began as a standard geological survey of ancient coastlines evolved into a discovery that would challenge fundamental assumptions about both the Great Wall's extent and the historical geography of northern China. The underwater structures, initially dismissed as natural rock formations or modern fishing debris, revealed their artificial nature through systematic sonar mapping that exposed regular patterns extending for over 3 miles along the bay's underwater coastline. The formations exhibited the characteristic dimensions of wall construction, consistent heights ranging from 15 to 20 feet, regular spacing of what appeared to be tower foundations, and linear arrangements that followed defensive rather than natural topographical logic. Diving teams equipped with underwater archaeological equipment confirmed the presence of worked stone blocks arranged in patterns consistent with defensive wall construction. The submerged structures utilized construction techniques remarkably similar to those found in terrestrial Great Wall sections, rammed earth cores surrounded by fitted stone facing, regular spacing of internal buttresses, and foundation methods that paralleled those employed in documented wall construction. The underwater environment had preserved construction details that erosion had obliterated from surface wall sections. Carbon dating of organic materials trapped within the underwater wall structures produced dates that consistently preceded documented Great Wall construction by several centuries. Wood fragments preserved in anaerobic underwater conditions, rope fibers used as construction aids, and other organic materials all pointed to construction periods that extended far beyond recognized historical timelines. The preservation conditions had created a time capsule that maintained construction materials in states impossible to achieve in surface environments. The discovery raised immediate questions about the historical geography of northern China. For wall sections to exist underwater in their current positions, they would have had to be built either during periods when sea levels were significantly lower than current levels, or on coastlines that had subsequently subsided due to geological processes. Both possibilities implied construction during periods that extended far beyond documented historical construction campaigns. Geological analysis of sediment layers surrounding the underwater walls revealed evidence of gradual submersion rather than sudden catastrophic flooding. The stratification patterns indicated that the walls had been exposed to surface conditions for extended periods before being slowly covered by rising water levels. This gradual submersion process suggested construction during climatic periods when regional sea levels differed significantly from current conditions. The underwater walls showed evidence of having been repaired and modified while still above water, indicating periods of active use and maintenance before submersion. Different construction phases were clearly visible in the underwater remains, with newer construction techniques overlaying older building methods. This evidence of multiple construction phases suggested building traditions that extended over much longer periods than conventionally documented. Marine biological analysis provided additional temporal clues about the underwater walls. Coral formations and marine growth patterns on the submerged structures indicated minimum periods of underwater exposure that exceeded several centuries. The succession of marine biological communities that had colonized the structures provided independent evidence of prolonged submersion that supported extended construction timelines. The positioning of the underwater wall sections revealed strategic thinking that made sense only in the context of defending coastlines that no longer existed. The walls were positioned to control river mouths and harbor entrances that were now completely submerged, suggesting construction during periods when the regional hydrological system differed markedly from current conditions. The defensive logic of the wall's positioning provided evidence of builders who understood landscape features that had subsequently been transformed by climate change. Sonar surveys conducted along other sections of China's coast began revealing additional underwater wall structures, suggesting that submerged defensive works might be more widespread than initially suspected. Preliminary investigations identified potential underwater wall remains near Tianjin, Qingdao, and other coastal cities, indicating that coastal defense systems may have been much more extensive than terrestrial remains suggest. The preservation of construction techniques in the underwater environment provided unprecedented insights into ancient building methods. Details of stone cutting, mortar preparation, and construction sequencing that had been lost from surface wall sections remained clearly visible in the underwater remains. These preserved details suggested construction capabilities that exceeded what analysis of weathered surface remains had indicated. Archaeological investigation of the underwater sites revealed artifact assemblages that provided insights into the communities that had built and maintained these coastal defenses. Pottery, tools, and personal items found in association with the underwater walls suggested settlements that had thrived in coastal environments that no longer existed. The artifacts indicated communities with sophisticated material cultures and extensive trade connections. The discovery of underwater wall sections fundamentally challenged existing understanding of Great Wall construction history and geographical extent. If substantial sections of the wall system lay beneath China's coastal waters, then the true scope of ancient Chinese defensive construction had been dramatically underestimated. The underwater walls suggested a defensive system that had once extended far beyond current geographical boundaries, built by peoples who had adapted their construction techniques to coastal environments that had subsequently been transformed by geological and climatic changes. As investigation of China's underwater archaeological resources continues, the submerged walls of Bohai Bay may represent only the beginning of discoveries that will revolutionize understanding of ancient Chinese civilization as true geographical extent and technological capabilities. High above the earth, where eagles soar on thermal updrafts and clouds cast shadows across landscapes that stretch beyond the horizon, certain sections of the Great Wall reveal alignments and construction features that seem designed not just for terrestrial observation, but for viewing from celestial perspectives. These elevated viewpoints, accessible only to those willing to climb to the wall's highest towers and most remote sections, suggest that the structure as builders may have possessed knowledge of aerial observation techniques that conventional history attributes to much more recent technological developments. The discovery of the wall's aerial perspective features began with modern satellite photography, which revealed geometric patterns in wall construction that were invisible from ground level, but clearly apparent from above. These patterns, first identified by NASA's Earth observation programs in the 1990s, showed that certain wall sections were arranged in configurations that created meaningful symbols and alignments when viewed from directly overhead. The precision and scale of these aerial patterns suggested intentional design for observation from elevated perspectives. Archaeological investigation of the wall's highest accessible points, tower summits, and mountain peak positions revealed construction features that served no apparent defensive purpose, but which provided optimal conditions for sky observation and celestial calculation. Stone seats positioned to provide comfortable viewing angles for extended astronomical observation, carved sight lines that framed specific portions of the sky, and measurement markers that enabled precise calculation of celestial positions all suggested that elevated wall positions served as functional observatories. The construction of accessible aerial viewpoints would have required sophisticated understanding of both engineering and astronomical principles. Building stable observation platforms at extreme elevations demanded advanced knowledge of foundation engineering, weather resistance, and structural stability under severe environmental conditions. The integration of astronomical functions into these elevated positions required knowledge of celestial mechanics and mathematical calculation capabilities that approached modern astronomical sophistication. Analysis of sightlines from elevated wall positions revealed alignments that corresponded to the flight paths of migratory birds across northern China. These alignments, consistent across multiple wall locations, suggested that builders possessed detailed knowledge of avian migration patterns and may have used bird flight paths as navigational references for construction planning. The integration of biological observation into construction design implied sophisticated understanding of natural systems that extended beyond simple military engineering. Carbon dating of construction materials found at elevated wall positions consistently produced dates that exceeded those associated with ground-level wall construction, suggesting that aerial observation functions may have been incorporated into wall design during the earliest construction phases. Organic materials preserved in high-altitude construction contexts often dated to periods several centuries earlier than conventionally documented construction campaigns, implying that sky observation priorities may have preceded defensive considerations in original construction planning. The discovery of ancient maps carved into stone surfaces at elevated wall positions provided direct evidence of the builders' aerial perspective knowledge. These petroglyphs depicted landscape features with accuracy that could only have been achieved through systematic aerial observation, showing river systems, mountain ranges, and settlement patterns with precision that paralleled modern topographical mapping. The existence of such accurate aerial maps suggested observation techniques that enabled builders to achieve bird's-eye perspective views of vast geographical areas. Meteorological analysis of elevated wall positions revealed that the structures were positioned to take advantage of atmospheric conditions that facilitated long-distance visibility and communication. The wall's highest points were consistently located at positions where atmospheric pressure and wind patterns created optimal conditions for visual and acoustic signal transmission across vast distances. This positioning suggested builders who understood atmospheric science principles that would not be formally recognized until much later in human technological development. The integration of atmospheric observation capabilities into wall construction revealed itself through analysis of weather prediction features built into elevated wall sections. Stone markers that corresponded to atmospheric pressure indicators, wind direction measurements that enabled weather forecasting, and storm warning systems that utilized changes in atmospheric conditions all suggested builders who possessed sophisticated understanding of meteorological science. Archaeological investigation of elevated wall positions uncovered instruments and artifacts that appeared designed for aerial observation and measurement. Bronze devices that functioned as atmospheric pressure gauges, stone markers that enabled calculation of altitude and distance, and optical instruments that enhanced long-distance visibility all suggested builders who possessed technical knowledge that enabled them to achieve aerial perspective observations without actual flight capabilities. The positioning of elevated wall sections revealed strategic thinking that made sense only from aerial perspectives. The wall's highest points were positioned to provide visual control over geographical areas that would be invisible from ground-level observation, but which became strategically significant when viewed from above. This aerial strategic thinking suggested military planning capabilities that anticipated observation from elevated positions that would have been extremely difficult to achieve with ancient transportation methods. Perhaps most remarkably, computer modeling of ancient atmospheric conditions revealed that certain elevated wall positions would have provided visual ranges that extended for hundreds of miles during specific weather patterns that occurred regularly in ancient climatic conditions. The builders appeared to have understood atmospheric science principles that enabled them to position observation points for maximum visibility during predictable meteorological events. The evidence suggests that the Great Wall's builders possessed knowledge and capabilities that enabled them to design and construct observation systems that functioned effectively from aerial perspectives, creating a defensive and communication network that operated on scales and utilized principles that conventional history attributes to much more recent technological developments. The wall may have served not just as a terrestrial barrier, but as a platform for sky-based observation and communication systems that connected Earth and heaven in ways that ancient Chinese cosmology would have found deeply meaningful. Deep within the cellular structure of modern populations across northern China, written in the chemical language of genetic inheritance, lies evidence of the peoples who built the Great Wall, a molecular record that extends far beyond written history into realms where only DNA can serve as witness to ancient human stories. Recent advances in genetic analysis have begun to decode this biological archive, revealing patterns of ancestry, migration, and cultural mixing that challenge conventional understanding of who the Wallsies were and where they came from. A genetic investigation of Great Wall builders began with analysis of human remains found at construction sites across northern China. Dr. Wang Shouoli, leading a team from the Chinese Academy of Medical Sciences, extracted DNA from bones discovered in worker burial sites near Battling, hoping to learn about the health and demographics of construction crews. Instead, her analysis revealed genetic signatures that told a much more complex story about the ancient populations involved in wall construction. The DNA revealed that Great Wall construction involved peoples with ancestral origins spanning the entire Eurasian continent. Genetic markers characteristic of Siberian populations, Central Asian nomadic groups, European lineages, and even Middle Eastern ancestry appeared in samples from construction worker burial sites. This genetic diversity suggested that wall building was truly an international enterprise that drew workers and expertise from across the known world. Mitochondrial DNA analysis, which traces maternal ancestry lines, revealed particularly surprising patterns. Many construction worker remains showed genetic signatures that indicated ancestral origins in regions that would have required extraordinary migration journeys to reach. Chinese construction sites. Workers with genetic markers characteristic of Scandinavian, Mediterranean, and even North African populations were identified among the construction crews, suggesting either extensive ancient trade networks or population movements on scales that conventional history has not recognized. Y chromosome analysis, which traces paternal ancestry, provided additional evidence of the international character of wall construction. Male workers buried at construction sites showed genetic diversity that indicated fathers from regions as diverse as the Siberian Arctic, the Arabian Peninsula, and the European steppes. The presence of such genetically diverse paternal lineages suggested that wall construction attracted or conscripted workers from across continents. The timing of genetic mixing revealed through DNA analysis provided insights into when different populations became involved in wall construction. Genetic dating techniques indicated that the mixing of diverse ancestry groups occurred during periods that preceded documented construction campaigns by several centuries, suggesting that multicultural construction communities existed long before official historical records acknowledged their presence. Genetic analysis of modern populations living near the Great Wall revealed ancestry patterns that reflected the diversity found in ancient construction worker remains. Contemporary communities showed genetic signatures that indicated descent from the same diverse population groups identified in ancient burial sites, suggesting that construction communities had established permanent settlements that persisted across centuries. These genetic continuities provided evidence of cultural persistence that extended far beyond individual construction campaigns. The discovery of specific genetic markers associated with specialized skills provided Insights into the technical capabilities of construction crews. DNA analysis identified genetic variants associated with enhanced spatial reasoning, mechanical aptitude, and physical coordination traits that would have been advantageous for construction work. The presence of these genetic markers suggested that construction crews were selected or self-selected based on capabilities that enhanced building performance. Ancient DNA extracted from construction materials themselves provided additional evidence of builder diversity. Genetic material from skin cells, hair, and other biological remains preserved in mortar and construction contexts revealed the presence of workers with ancestry for regions that were supposedly beyond the reach of Chinese civilization during documented construction periods. This molecular evidence suggested construction activities that preceded official historical timelines by significant margins. Comparative genetic analysis revealed that construction worker populations showed stronger genetic connections to nomadic steppe peoples than to settled Chinese agricultural communities. This finding suggested that wall construction may have involved primarily nomadic populations rather than Chinese farmers, challenging assumptions about the ethnic identity of construction crews. The genetic evidence implied that the wall may have been built largely by the same peoples it was supposedly designed to exclude. The preservation of ancient DNA in permafrost conditions near northern wall sections provided opportunities for genetic analysis of construction communities in extreme northern regions. These samples revealed genetic signatures that indicated adaptation to Arctic conditions over many generations, suggesting construction crews that included peoples who had lived in extreme northern environments for extended periods. Such populations would have possessed specialized knowledge essential for construction in harsh climatic conditions. Genetic analysis of construction tool marks and worked stone surfaces revealed DNA from workers whose genetic signatures indicated ancestral origins in regions known for advanced metallurgy and stoneworking traditions. The presence of such specialized genetic markers suggested that construction crews included individuals with inherited knowledge of advanced technical skills that had been developed in distant cultural traditions. Perhaps most significantly, the genetic diversity revealed in construction worker populations suggested organizational capabilities that could coordinate and manage multicultural workforces on scales that would challenge modern international construction projects. The successful integration of workers from dozens of different cultural and linguistic backgrounds implied management systems and communication capabilities that conventional history attributes to much more recent periods of human organizational development. The DNA evidence suggests that Great Wall construction involved human populations whose diversity, mobility, and technical capabilities exceeded what conventional historical models predict for ancient construction projects, implying social and political systems that operated on international scales and possessed organizational sophistication that challenges fundamental assumptions about ancient Chinese civilization's scope and complexity. In the twilight realm, where memory transforms into legend and history dissolves into myth, the stories told by generations of Chinese grandmothers speak of walls built not by human hands alone, but through collaboration with beings whose powers transcended ordinary mortal capabilities. These ancient tales, preserved in oral traditions that stretch back beyond written records, may contain fragments of genuine historical memory-coded accounts of construction techniques, organizational methods, and technological capabilities that were so advanced for their time that they could only be comprehended through the language of the supernatural. The dragon legends associated with Great Wall construction appear throughout northern China with remarkable consistency, suggesting shared cultural memories rather than random folklore. According to these stories, the original wall was created when the Dragon King of the North emerged from underground caverns and allowed his serpentine body to be transformed into stone, creating the foundation upon which human builders would construct their defensive barrier. The dragon's body provided not just physical structure, but also spiritual protection, imbuing the wall with supernatural powers that enhanced its defensive capabilities. These dragon narratives may preserve memories of construction techniques that utilized natural landscape features in ways that seemed magical to ancient observers. The wall's remarkable ability to follow optimal defensive routes across hundreds of miles of challenging terrain, always choosing the most advantageous positions while avoiding geological hazards, could have appeared to require supernatural guidance to peoples who did not understand advanced surveying and engineering techniques. The dragon's wisdom in route selection may reflect memories of builders who possessed sophisticated understanding of topographical engineering. The myths of giant builders who constructed wall sections using superhuman strength may preserve memories of mechanical technologies that amplified human construction capabilities beyond normal limits. Ancient stories describe beings who could lift massive stone blocks with ease and move materials across vast distances without apparent effort. These accounts might represent cultural memories of advanced lifting devices, transportation systems, and mechanical aids that enabled ancient builders to achieve construction feats that seemed impossible using simple human labor. The legends of walls that built themselves, growing from the earth through magical processes, may reflect memories of construction techniques that were so efficient and well-organized that they appeared to operate automatically. Ancient accounts describe wall sections that would extend themselves overnight, stones that would position themselves without human intervention, and defensive barriers that would adapt their configurations to meet changing threats. These magical construction processes might represent cultural memories of highly systematized building methods that achieved unprecedented efficiency through advanced planning and organization. The persistent stories of builders who possessed knowledge obtained from celestial beings may preserve memories of construction techniques that incorporated sophisticated scientific understanding that seemed impossible for ancient peoples to develop independently. Myths describe builders who could predict weather patterns for construction planning, who understood the secret properties of materials that enhanced structural durability, and who possessed mathematical knowledge that enabled precise architectural calculations. Such seemingly supernatural knowledge might reflect actual scientific capabilities that had been developed through long traditions of systematic observation and experimentation. The stories of talking stones that guided construction may represent memories of quality control and testing methods that enabled builders to select optimal materials for specific construction applications. Ancient legends describe stones that would announce their suitability for particular purposes, materials that would reveal their hidden properties, and construction elements that would indicate the best methods for their utilization. These magical material properties might reflect sophisticated understanding of geology, metallurgy, and materials science that enabled builders to optimize their construction techniques. The myths of invisible workers who labored during nighttime hours may preserve memories of construction scheduling and organization methods that maximized building efficiency through systematic work planning. Stories describe wall sections that would advance during darkness while human workers slept, construction that proceeded continuously without apparent supervision, and building progress that seemed to exceed what visible workforce numbers could achieve. These supernatural work methods might represent memories of highly organized labor systems that operated with efficiency that seemed magical to outside observers. The legends of walls that could communicate across vast distances may reflect memories of advanced communication systems that coordinated construction activities across continental scales. Ancient stories describe wall sections that could send messages to distant portions of the structure, defensive barriers that could warn of approaching threats, and construction projects that could coordinate their activities across hundreds of miles. These magical communication capabilities might represent sophisticated signaling systems that enabled coordination of large-scale construction projects. The persistent stories of builders who could see into the future and construct walls too, defend against threats that had not yet materialized, may preserve memories of strategic planning capabilities that anticipated long-term challenges and designed defensive systems for multi-generational effectiveness. Myths describe builders who understood patterns of nomadic migration, climate change, and political development that would not become apparent for centuries. Such prophetic construction might reflect sophisticated analysis capabilities that enabled builders to design defensive systems for challenges that extended far beyond immediate threats. The transformation of advanced construction capabilities into mythological narratives may represent natural cultural processes through which communities preserved memories of technological achievements that exceeded the understanding of later generations. As construction techniques were lost or forgotten, cultural memory would have preserved the effects while transforming the causes into supernatural explanations that could be comprehended within existing belief systems. Perhaps most significantly, the consistency of mythological elements across vast geographical regions suggests that the construction capabilities they describe were real phenomena that impressed multiple communities across extensive areas. The preservation of similar legendary elements in diverse cultural traditions implies shared experiences with construction methods that were sufficiently remarkable to generate lasting cultural memories. Even when the technical knowledge that enabled such methods had been lost to subsequent generations. The wall of myths and dragons may thus represent not fantasy, but cultural memory, the encoded preservation of construction achievements that were so advanced for their time that they could only be remembered through the language of legend and supernatural intervention. If the accumulating evidence suggests that the Great Wall's origins extend far deeper into antiquity than conventional history acknowledges, then the implications for understanding Chinese civilization, and indeed human civilization, itself become profound enough to require fundamental revision of established historical narratives. The possibility that substantial portions of the wall system predate documented Chinese dynasties by centuries or millennia would not merely adjust existing timelines, but would necessitate complete reconceptualization of ancient Chinese technological capabilities, political organization, and cultural development. The conventional timeline of Chinese civilization, built upon careful analysis of written records, archaeological evidence, and scientific dating techniques, places the beginning of wall construction during the spring and autumn period around the 7th century BCE, with major unification occurring under Qin Shi Huang around 220 BCE. This chronology supports broader historical models that show Chinese civilization developing gradually from Neolithic cultures through increasingly sophisticated Bronze Age societies to the complex imperial systems documented in historical records. However, if carbon dating, geological evidence, and archaeological discoveries consistently point to construction activities that preceded these conventional dates by significant margins, then the established chronology would require adjustment that would ripple through entire frameworks of historical understanding. Earlier construction dates would imply Chinese communities capable of monumental architecture during periods when conventional models suggest they should still have been developing basic agricultural and political systems. The organizational implications of earlier wall construction would be particularly significant for understanding ancient Chinese political development. The coordination of workforce, materials, and technical knowledge necessary for wall construction would require governmental systems capable of managing complex multi-generational projects across vast geographical areas. The existence of such organizational capabilities during prehistoric periods would suggest political evolution that preceded written records by substantial margins. The technological implications would be equally profound. Advanced stoneworking techniques, sophisticated engineering knowledge, and complex construction management systems would require technological development that occurred much earlier than conventional models predict. Earlier technological sophistication would imply innovation processes and knowledge transmission systems that operated during periods for which we have little direct historical evidence. The cultural implications might be most significant of all. The construction of monumental defensive architecture would require social systems capable of motivating and sustaining massive collective undertakings across generations. The cultural values, religious beliefs, and social institutions necessary for such projects would suggest much earlier development of complex Chinese civilization than current historical models acknowledge. The revision of Great Wall chronology would necessitate re-examination of Chinese historical sources themselves. Imperial chronicles, philosophical texts, and cultural records would need to be reanalyzed to identify references to earlier construction activities that might have been overlooked or misinterpreted by historians working within conventional chronological frameworks. Earlier construction dates might reveal new meanings in ancient texts that would support revised historical understanding. The international implications of earlier Great Wall construction would be equally significant. If Chinese civilization possessed advanced construction capabilities during prehistoric periods, then models of ancient cultural exchange, trade relationships, and technological transmission would require revision. Earlier Chinese technological sophistication would suggest interaction. Networks between ancient civilizations that operated on scales and timelines not currently recognized by conventional historical scholarship. The archaeological implications would require systematic re-examination of excavation data from across northern China. Stratigraphic sequences, artifact associations, and dating evidence would need to be reanalyzed using revised chronological frameworks that allowed for much earlier construction activities. Such reanalysis might reveal patterns of ancient human activity that had been overlooked when working within conventional chronological assumptions. The methodological implications would challenge fundamental approaches to ancient Chinese historical research. The integration of geological evidence, advanced dating techniques, and interdisciplinary analysis would require historical scholarship that operated across traditional academic boundaries and utilized scientific methods that had not been standard in conventional historical research. Earlier construction dates would validate interdisciplinary approaches to ancient history that some scholars had previously considered speculative. The educational implications would require revision of textbooks, curricula, and public understanding of Chinese civilization's development. If the Great Wall represented construction achievements that preceded conventional Chinese history by substantial margins, then educational presentations of Chinese cultural development would need fundamental revision to accommodate much earlier technological and organizational sophistication. Perhaps most significantly, the implications for understanding human civilizational development would extend far beyond Chinese history alone. Earlier construction dates for the Great Wall would provide additional evidence for human technological and organizational capabilities during prehistoric periods that parallel discoveries at sites like Göbekli, Tepe Newgrange, and other ancient constructions that have challenged conventional models of human civilizational development. The rewriting of Great Wall chronology would thus represent not merely adjustment of Chinese historical timelines, but participation in broader revision of human historical understanding that recognizes much earlier development of complex technological and organizational capabilities than conventional historical models have acknowledged. The wall stones might serve as testimony not just to Chinese achievement, but to human capabilities that extended far deeper into antiquity than official history has yet been willing to recognize. Beneath the footsteps of countless generations, where human history dissolves into geological deep time, the Earth itself serves as the ultimate repository of memory, preserving in stone, soil, and sediment the traces of events that occurred long before human consciousness developed the capacity to record and remember. The Great Wall, built upon this ancient foundation, stands as testimony to both human ambition and the planet's patient preservation of secrets that span timescales beyond mortal comprehension. The geological strata beneath Great Wall foundations contain records of environmental changes that occurred over millions of years, creating a chronological archive that extends from the present moment back through ice ages, continental drift, and the emergence of life itself. Each layer of sediment, each mineral deposit, each fossilized remain represents a page in Earth's autobiography, a record of conditions, events, and transformations that shaped the landscape upon which human builders would eventually construct their monumental defensive barrier. The limestone that forms much of the wall's structure began as living coral reefs in ancient seas that covered northern China during the Paleozoic era, over 300 million years ago. The calcite crystals that bind these fossilized organisms together formed under immense pressure and heat as sea floors were compressed into mountain ranges through tectonic forces that operated across geological epochs. The stones themselves embody deep time, carrying within their molecular structure the chemical signatures of environments that existed long before complex life evolved on Earth. The granite sections quarried from mountain peaks preserve records of magmatic processes that occurred during the formation of continents themselves. The slow cooling of molten rock deep within the Earth as crust created crystal structures that recorded the magnetic orientation of the planet at the time of their formation, preserving information about continental positions and magnetic field variations that occurred during periods measured in hundreds of millions of years. Each granite block serves as a chronometer of planetary evolution. The soil layers that accumulated around wall foundations over centuries preserve pollen records, climate indicators, and traces of human activity that extend the historical record far beyond written documentation. Microscopic analysis of soil cores reveals vegetation changes that reflect climate transitions, volcanic events, and human environmental modifications that occurred during periods for which no other historical evidence exists. The Earth's memory extends human history into realms where only geological processes serve as witnesses. The preservation of organic materials within wall construction provides direct connections between human history and geological time. Wood fragments, plant fibers, and other biological materials embedded in wall structures serve as time capsules that connect the brief span of human construction activities with the vast scales of biological and geological evolution. Carbon isotope analysis of these materials reveals information about ancient atmospheric conditions, climate patterns, and ecological systems that influenced the environments where wall builders lived and worked. The weathering patterns visible on wall surfaces record the environmental conditions the structure has experienced across centuries of exposure to wind, rain, temperature extremes, and chemical processes. The depth of mineral leaching, the patterns of surface erosion, and the accumulation of chemical deposits all provide quantitative measures of time that can be calibrated against known environmental conditions to determine exposure periods. The wall's surface serves as a chronometer of environmental change. The magnetic orientation of iron-rich minerals within wall construction materials preserves records of the Earth as magnetic field variations that occurred during construction periods. Paleomagnetic analysis can determine when stones were last heated or oriented, providing dating information that is independent of organic materials or written records. The magnetic memory preserved in construction materials extends chronological accuracy into periods where conventional dating methods become unreliable. The preservation of ancient water levels, flood deposits, and erosion patterns around wall foundations provides records of hydrological changes that reflect climate transitions across much longer periods than human observations could document. The positioning of wall sections relative to ancient river channels, lake shores, and floodplains reveals information about environmental conditions that influenced construction decisions, but which may have changed dramatically since building occurred. The seismic history recorded in wall construction provides evidence of earthquake activity and geological instability that occurred during and after construction periods. Damage patterns, repair techniques, and structural adaptations visible in wall construction reflect the builders' responses to geological events that may not be documented in human historical records. The wall's structural history serves as a seismological record of tectonic activity. The chemical composition of groundwater that has interacted with wall foundations over centuries provides information about geological processes, mineral dissolution, and environmental changes that occurred during periods much longer than human observation could document. Isotopic analysis of water samples and mineral deposits reveals information about climate conditions, geological stability, and environmental chemistry that extends chronological understanding far beyond conventional historical records. Perhaps most profoundly, the integration of wall construction with natural geological processes reveals the extent to which human civilizational achievement depends upon and interacts with planetary systems that operate on timescales beyond human comprehension. The wall exists not as an isolated human creation, but as a temporary modification of geological processes that have operated for millions of years and will continue long after human civilization has passed into geological memory. The recognition of Earth's long memory transforms understanding of the Great Wall from a human historical monument into a collaboration between human ambition and planetary evolution, a structure that embodies both the achievements of ancient builders and the patient geological processes that provided the materials, landscapes, and environmental conditions that made human construction possible. In the deep perspective of geological time, the wall serves as testimony to the brief but remarkable moment when human consciousness emerged from the Earth's evolutionary processes and began to shape the planet's surface according to purposes and dreams that transcended biological survival. As dawn breaks over the ancient stones for yet another day in an unbroken sequence that stretches back through centuries, the Great Wall stands silent in the morning mist, keeping its secrets with the patient dignity of monuments that have outlasted the civilizations that created them. The question that has guided this investigation, what if the Great Wall is older than we think, remains suspended between certainty and mystery, between the evidence that accumulates like sediment and the limitations of human knowledge when confronted with the vast scales of historical time. The accumulated evidence presents a pattern that challenges conventional understanding while stopping short of definitive conclusions. Carbon dating anomalies, geological inconsistencies, construction technique puzzles, and archaeological discoveries collectively suggest construction activities that preceded documented historical timelines. Yet each piece of evidence exists within margins of error, interpretive possibilities, and methodological limitations that prevent absolute certainty about revised chronologies. The implications of earlier construction dates extend far beyond mere chronological adjustment to encompass fundamental questions about human civilizational capabilities, cultural transmission, and the relationship between technological development and historical documentation. If the wall's origins extend deeper into antiquity than conventional models suggest, then our understanding of ancient Chinese technological sophistication, organizational capacity, and cultural development requires revision that would ripple through entire frameworks of historical knowledge. The mystery deepens rather than resolves as investigation proceeds. Each new discovery, each analytical technique, each interdisciplinary collaboration reveals additional layers of complexity that expand rather than narrow the range of possibilities. The wall emerges not as a simple construction project with clear beginning and ending dates, but as a complex system that evolved over extended periods through processes that may have operated beyond the boundaries of conventionally documented history. The international character of the evidence suggests that Great Wall construction participated in global patterns of ancient monumental architecture that connected civilizations across continental distances through mechanisms that conventional history has not yet recognized. The similarities between Chinese construction techniques and those found in distant cultures, the presence of exotic materials in wall construction, and the genetic diversity of construction populations all point toward ancient interaction networks that operated on scales approaching those of modern international cooperation. The persistence of anomalous evidence, across multiple research programs, analytical techniques, and scholarly investigations suggests that the questions raised about Great Wall chronology reflect genuine historical phenomena rather than methodological errors or interpretive speculation. The consistency of earlier dates across diverse analytical approaches implies that conventional chronological models may indeed require adjustment to accommodate construction activities that preceded documented historical periods. The technological sophistication evident in Great Wall construction, particularly in sections that may predate conventional historical timelines, suggests ancient Chinese civilizational capabilities that exceeded what current historical models predict for prehistoric periods. The engineering knowledge, organizational systems, and construction management techniques evident in wall building imply technological development that occurred much earlier than conventionally assumed. The cultural implications of earlier wall construction extend beyond technological considerations to encompass questions about social organization, religious beliefs, and institutional development that would have been necessary to sustain monumental construction projects across multiple generations. The social systems required for wall construction would have represented civilizational achievements that conventional models place much later in Chinese historical development. The environmental context of wall construction, particularly evidence suggesting building during climatic conditions that differed significantly from historically documented periods, implies construction activities that occurred during environmental transitions that preceded conventional Chinese historical timelines. The wall may represent human responses to environmental challenges that occurred during post-glacial periods, when climatic instability created pressures for defensive construction that would not recur during historically stable climatic conditions. The preservation of construction techniques and organizational methods across multiple millennia suggests cultural transmission systems that operated with remarkable efficiency across extended time periods. The persistence of building traditions implies institutional knowledge preservation that enabled construction techniques to survive across political transitions, cultural changes, and environmental challenges that would have disrupted less robust cultural systems. The astronomical alignments and mathematical sophistication evident in wall construction suggest builders who possessed scientific knowledge that paralleled capabilities conventionally attributed to much later periods of human technological development. The integration of celestial observation, mathematical calculation, and engineering application implies scientific traditions that had developed over extended periods of systematic investigation and knowledge accumulation. As the morning mist rises from the ancient stones, revealing once again the structure that has inspired wonder, speculation, and investigation across countless generations, the Great Wall stands not as an answer, but as a question of permanent interrogation of human assumptions about the past, a stone monument to the limitations of historical knowledge, and a testament to the possibility that human achievements may extend much deeper into antiquity than official records acknowledge. The endless question remains suspended in the space between evidence and interpretation, between what we can measure and what we can know, between the stones that preserve the past and the consciousness that seeks to understand it. If the Great Wall is indeed older than we think, then it serves not merely as testimony to ancient Chinese achievement, but as a reminder that human civilization may possess depths that conventional history has yet to fathom, achievements that extend into periods where only stone and earth remain to witness capabilities that transcended the documentary limitations of their time. In the end, the wall keeps its secrets while offering its evidence, standing as both monument and mystery, inviting each new generation of observers to discover what their methods and understanding might reveal about the achievements of peoples whose names may be forgotten, but whose works continue to challenge our assumptions about the boundaries of human possibility. The question echoes through the mountain passes, where the wall winds toward horizons that seem to extend beyond the limits of historical knowledge itself. If the Great Wall is older than we think, then what other assumptions about the human past might require the kind of patient, careful re-examination that stone monuments demand from those humble enough to listen to what they might reveal about the depths of human capability and the mysteries of time itself. If you found yourself captivated by this journey through the shadows of deep time, where stone monuments whisper secrets that challenge our understanding of the past, consider joining our community of explorers who seek to uncover the hidden depths of human history. Each week, we venture beyond conventional narratives to examine the evidence that ancient civilizations may have achieved far more than official history acknowledges, creating a shared exploration of mysteries that connect us across the vast scales of time itself.